Coming up on this episode of Bro, Do You Even Talk Pinball? Got a special interview with David Thiel.
We have news and updates. We have updates for some of our old reviews.
All that and more coming right up.
Double super jackpot!
I need a ramp. I need a loop. I want targets I can hit. I need the scoop. I need a double super jackpot in my life. That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, your hosts, Nick Lane and Kevin Manny of Buffalo Pinball.
It is Friday, December 14th.
It is.
We're early in the month for doing a monthly podcast.
But we have good reason.
Yeah. I'm Nick Lane.
I'm Kevin Manny.
There you go. We'll introduce ourselves in addition to Rudy. So
The double introduction.
You can put the name with the voice.
That's right.
It's just Kevin's got the deep voice.
Yeah.
We've established that over and over again.
Nick's almost there, but you know.
I can fake it till I make it. All right. So we're really excited. So we're sort of motivated to have this podcast early on because we've got David Thiel, who's done an incredible body of work in pinball audio. Anybody who's in pinball has definitely heard his work at some point.
Yep.
Many of us have his games in our collection. So I'm a huge audio guy. We'll talk about this more with David, but I've purchased machines that aren't particularly good because I got suckered in with the music.
That's how we got connected initially. So
oh, really? We'll talk about that.
We'll talk
okay,
about that,
we'll get there. Good times. So let's do our partner things before we get into the interview. Kevin, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Let's start with our friends at Comet Pinball, cometpinball.com. If you need lighting for your pinball machines, new LEDs, grab them from Comet. They're great. We put them in all our machines. Double Danger, ddpinball.com. Use coupon code Buffalo to save 15% on your hats, shirts, swag, pins, what else? Lapel pins. We got patches, all sorts of stuff. Double Danger for all your pinball-related apparel. Pinball Life, pinballlife.com. If you got a pinball machine, you're going to need parts. Pinball Life's the place you should go. They got great customer service, all the parts you could need. Jersey Jack Pinball. David is very familiar with them. JerseyJackPinball.com. David has done the audio on Dialed In, Parts of the Caribbean, and Hobbit. So we're going to talk more about that. And don't forget Wizard of Oz as well. So great pinball machines from our friends at Jersey Jack Pinball. Titan Pinball, titanpinball.com. Use coupon code Buffalo to save 10% on the silicone rings to replace the rubber rings on your pinball machines. They look great. They hold up great. They clean up great. Check them out, titanpinball.com. Nick, do the honors of Community Beer Works.
Community Beer Works makes the best beer in Buffalo. I kid you not. Absolutely love their beer. They don't disappoint. They're very enthusiastic about pinball. They've been very supportive of us for a number of years now. We've got 7 machines there and maybe more on the way. Who knows? They got a new facility, so check it out. Community Beer Works.
All right. Pin Stadium, they make awesome lighting kits for your pinball machines. Light up the entire playfield, top to bottom, front to back. It's going to use coupon code Buffalo to save 10% on that, and as well as their new Orion's Belt flasher kits. Pinball Arcade, our friends at pinballarcade.com, virtual recreations of real pinball machines for your phone, video game console, PC. Check them out. And, of course, tiltcycle.com. Use coupon code Buffalo to save 20% on your orders from his shop. And he's been doing some pretty good deals there for Christmas. He's been selling a whole bunch of stuff. So, all right.
Should we jump into the interview?
I think we should. I think it's time.
Okay.
Let's get into it, and we're gonna welcome aboard our friend David Thiel. And of course, I lost my intro, so here we go. Let's bring him on. David Thiel. So since 1980, David has created interactive audio packages for more than 70 major published products, including classic arcade video games like Q Bert, Reactor, and Mad Planets, as well as 28 pinball machines, from Gottlieb's Q Bert in 1983 to Jersey Jack Pinball's Pirates of the Caribbean just this year. Today, he's working on projects currently in development with pinball startup Deeproot Pinball to be revealed in 2019, we hope. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, you hear me?
We can. Sound great.
Excellent.
Looking good. So how are things in your world?
The Great Northwest is great. It's what you'd expect. It's winter. It's rainy. It's fine.
Awesome. So, in preparing for the interview today, I was like, you always kind of want to go to the how did you get into pinball thing, but I don't want to take it there. I want to say, what was your first pinball related project, and how did that come to be for your first pinball project? Was it Q Bert, or was there something else in there before then?
Yeah, Q Bert's Quest, I never knew about, so we won't talk about that right this second.
Okay.
Even though I put it on my list. We were the company. We were a small company working out of our bedrooms, making console games and conversions for console games and for the Mac and the PC, that kind of thing. And we wanted to become a more real company. And my partner, Richard Ditton, really wanted to write a pinball operating system. He really wanted to. He'd been involved in the space shuttle launch software in Florida.
Wow.
Then he quit that and came to Chicago, and then he worked at Midway, did Domino Man, some of those coin-op video games. Journey, that was one of his.
Oh, yeah.
Then we all met at this small company, and that company went out of business, and so Richard and his wife and I started this company, and we were small sweat equity, right? You know, very, very low overhead, taking nothing but subsistence salaries. And through the grapevine, I have no idea how Richard even got caught wind of this, but Gary Stern wanted to start a pinball company again, right? His father had done it, and he wanted to do it, and he was going to do it a lot like the way his father had done it. He was going to take the industry leader, the System 11 board, and knock that off. It's allowed. You can copy circuit boards. What you can't copy is the operating system. That's, that IP is really nailed. So he needed somebody to write a pinball operating system and then code rules and do dots and do all that stuff. And so we had a meeting at Richard and Elaine's house, and Gary and the financial guy showed up, and Gary was like, very, very conservative. He had both suspenders and a belt on, and he told us, it's just like, why do I think you guys can do it? And we said, well, we can do it. And so he contracted us to do it, and Richard did it. And then when it came to the soundboard, they didn't care. Of course, it's the sound. So they didn't need to be the Williams soundboard, is what I'm saying. So I got to make the Data East soundboard, which is a lot like the Williams soundboard. I mean, there was only one chip anybody was going to use, the Yamaha chip. But I got to configure it the way I thought it should be configured, with 3 decent amplifiers and in real stereo.
That's awesome.
It was, if you would have to be naive to do it that way, because the part that Williams was buying was dramatically cheaper. But it really didn't sound very good. It sounded okay until you cranked it to coin-op volumes, and then it had this really nasty transistory edge to it that you just had to work around. And we had these Toshiba amps that were 12 watts, and they really sounded good. And it's not a real stereo chip. You can take and assign anything panned hard left or hard right or the middle. But for coin-op, that's fine, particularly pinball, because it's really hard to make stereo anyhow. The speakers are too close. So that was our first project. That was my first real pinball project, was Laser War.
There it is. We can take a look at it. So let's jump back to Q Bert's Quest. You have that in your resume, but you said you didn't understand, or you weren't a part of that. So did they just take your sounds from Q Bert and throw it in a pinball machine? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I was speaking in Las Vegas at a retro gaming thing. It was like a console thing that they have there every other year. And so while I was there, I thought, well, I'd go to the Pinball Museum. And while I was at the Pinball Museum, I saw Q Bert's Quest. Now, somewhere in the back of my mind, I think I knew this, but I wasn't paying any attention. So then I played Q Bert's Quest, and I was like, holy cow, those are all my sounds. Now, they had... Pinball at Gottlieb had a great sound guy, a guy named Craig Byerwaltis, who's still out there, and he's like almost everybody else doing, something for slot machines in Vegas or somewhere. But he was my counterpart. He did pinball audio for like Haunted House and all those games while I was doing video games at Gottlieb. And so he'd written some connective material and maybe a little noodle in the back but 75% of all the sounds that come out of Q Bert's Quest is my stuff. And I was like, okay, I'll add that to my list. But I had no idea.
So you sent us a whole bunch of sounds, and I want to play just a little clip of Q Bert's Quest here so everybody can hear it.
Hello, I'm Brenda.
And that's from 1983. So we'll kind of go through this chronologically as we talk about the games. And again, see the evolution of the sound in pinball.
Yeah, so then we can jump up to the Laser War since we talked about that. We'll hear a little bit of that too. The ion cannon, right? In Laser War Multi-Ball. That's what that was?
Yeah.
I was impressed when I owned a time machine, and that's sort of like the story I told earlier, where even though I've been playing pinball for a number of years, when I bought it, I got suckered in because I really liked the sound and the music in it. Like I can be blind in terms of maybe the shots aren't great, the rules aren't great, where normally that doesn't happen for me. But I love the sounds. I fell in love with it, and I bought the game. And then after playing it for a while, I was like, all right, I don't like the way game plays, so I got rid of it. But that's just one example of how important sound and music is in a pinball machine to me, and how it's motivated me to get a game.
Yeah, so we'll hear a little bit about Time Machine, and then let's talk about the sound in that, since we're kind of on that topic right now. So that's the jackpot sound effect, but you had to kind of encapsulate a bunch of different eras of pinball sounds in that one machine. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a fun project. It was a nifty metaphor. But in that time, licenses really hadn't kicked in, and all the pinball companies since the 40s had taken some cultural meme, something that was interesting at the time, and just kind of took it and abused it. And it was always just, enough to be not IP infringement. So what movie at the time was Time Machine based on?
It had to be Back to the Future, right? Yeah.
Cha-ching! Absolutely. Yeah. So, but I mean, it's only just as a notion, right? So you travel back in time. You start at that time was in the 80s, and work your way back. And so each decade, each time you qualified a decade, you move backwards. So I had to come up with something for the 70s and something for the 60s. And then the game designer came up with a clever idea. He says, for the 50s, let's put a real chime unit in the game.
Yeah.
And so that was fun. Though that particular technology, that FM chip, is a nifty chip. It has like incredible possibilities, and it's incredibly broad in terms of what it can do. But it does some things better than others. And pulling a snare drum out of that thing is like pulling teeth. I was really proud of the snare drums I managed to make because they're really hard. But it does bells all day. So we got the request to simulate all the bells, because the hardware unit can't be turned down. So if you have it on location. So there is a mode. You flip a dip switch and the bell unit won't go, but you'll hear all the bells that I'm making, and they sound just like the bells, except, they're on the volume control now.
Oh, interesting.
So there's two. So there are actual bells in there, but then you have simulated bells for when people want to adjust the volume of them.
The operator has the option. I mean, back in the day, the option was clippers. You find a lot of EM machines where the bell units are just clipped.
Get them out of there.
Yeah, because there's no, it's binary. You either get all the bells or you get nothing.
Exactly.
So I've always been curious about this. I was impressed when I had the time machine that it wasn't stereo. I thought that was awesome. But then eventually stereo was dropped from Data East, right? They went to mono, and when it became Stern, they still had their games in mono until all the way up through.
Was Aerosmith Or no, it was
What was the first game?
First Spike game.
WWE. Yeah.
So that kind of blew my mind because it sounds so much better in stereo, and I know on location it doesn't matter as much. Do you know the reasoning behind that? Is it just simply cost or?
Well, okay. The SAM system was designed in what? I used it in 2006. I think it was probably designed in 2004, and it's based on some kind of embedded, 16, 32-bit processor. I never really knew, but it was some embedded systems processor, not like an Intel or an AMD or something. And that means a bunch of things. The kind of bandwidth that you get going out to memory is lower than we typically enjoy now. The amount of memory on the SAM system was really quite limited. I mean, it was 32 meg, right?
Oh, wow.
The standard SAM game. You can see where I'm going here.
Yeah.
Stereo takes twice as much memory. And but then the third thing was SAM was the first game that didn't have a soundboard. Sound is created by that embedded processor when it's running rules, scanning switches, doing everything else.
Okay.
And it really, Lyman wrote that thing, and he did a great job. And it's not trivial to do. And you got to keep out of the way, of everybody else who needs to use that processor. Well, stereo would have taken twice the CPU, would have taken twice the bus bandwidth, would have taken twice the memory. It just was never going to happen on the SAM system, and that's the reason why.
Okay.
That's interesting. It's good to know.
Yeah.
So to just recap a little bit. So you were able to do it on the Data East machines because you were generating the sounds in real time?
Well, back in the day, 1986, when I spec'd that board, in $1986, that Yamaha chip, I think, was like 26 or 27 bucks. Just one chip, right? That's probably the most expensive chip in the pinball machine. But it's a full-blown synthesizer. I mean, it's kick-ass for what it does. Williams had only made like 2 games with that. Originally, it was brought into coin-op by Atari for Marble Madness. That was really the first place it ever got used.
Okay.
Because prior to that, your choices for synthesis chips, things that made sound, very grim. Very square wave, nasty, not much to go on. You either built something yourself, or you did what Gottlieb and Williams did, and you wrote code that made sound. So that's what Eugene Jarvis and those guys did back in the day with Flash. There's solid state pinball sounds before Flash and then after Flash, right? And that was Eugene's contribution. There was some guy who actually wrote the core system, but he left Williams, and they handed it. That was like what they handed Eugene to do when he came from California. And Flash sounds were just featured in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Really? And which one? The first one?
The one that was just Stern's most recent game.
Oh, okay. Oh,
the one with the 80s
Deadpool.
arcade metaphor and all that.
Deadpool.
Yeah, Deadpool. I'm sorry.
That's the one that's got all the classic sounds in it. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
Deadpool. And those are Eugene sounds.
Yeah, those are iconic early '80s arcade and pinball sounds. You hear them and you instantly recognize them, right? Defender and all those games.
That was the thing. They were so good, and they used them all the time. So it sort of just became the Williams sound. And then those same sounds are in Defender. Those same sounds are in Robotron. You can compare Robotron to Flash. You will hear some of those same sounds.
That's amazing. Well, I think Nick and I joke that like when we play like Jungle Lord and stuff, it makes space sounds because those were the sounds that they had at the time. So when you're in the jungle, it sounds like you're in space, and everything sounds like
got
space.
a sweet elephant in it, though. That must have broke the budget getting that sound in there.
Well, the deal with that technique is that you're just writing code, and you're writing code on a minimal system. I mean, a system that's got virtually nothing. I mean, it was amazing. I was so glad when I think back that Eugene had raised the bar just so high, right? Because when I came in, I I had the same tasks to do, but I didn't, they owned that space, right? They had done all that. So I needed to find some new things to do, but it's just code. I just had to be creative. Play the clip, the 1985 rock reactor clip.
Okay. Okay, so that's from a video game, right?
Well, yeah, sort of. So, yeah, that's the very first thing I ever did, right? That was the very first game I worked on. It was the Tim Skelly game. It wasn't all that successful commercially. It was a trackball game. But I looked around and I said, my audience is like 13 to 15-year-old sweaty boys. And I really didn't think they wanted to hear what most of the coin-op games were making at that time, which to me kind of sounded like mall organ demonstrations, tinkly poodly. So I said, they want rock and roll. So how the hell can I make rock and roll with a 6502, a DAC, and 128 bytes of memory? I mean, at 2K a ROM. Let's go. And so I found a trick. I found a way of doing it, and I was really happy with that. And somebody, in one of the streams that I saw today, somebody said, well, it was like on Pinside, somebody said, hey, yay, Reactor. Oh, we can't talk about that because that's video game. And I said, well, wait, because here's the deal. A couple of years ago, I was at Expo, and Chris Granner was giving a sound talk. So, of course, I had to sit in the audience and watch. And he was talking about the history and the way things progressed and this and that. And then he got to Premier's Rock, right? And then he played a clip from it. That's what it plays. When you press the start button, it plays the rock music from Reactor.
Oh,
I had no idea again.
That's funny. I played that game for the first time at Expo last year, and of course it was in that noisy hall, and you couldn't even hear it. But now I'm going to pay attention the next time I play it.
That's how it starts. It starts out with that nasty, ratty rock and roll riff that I wrote, and it never shows up again. But it was like, okay, yeah, that's pinball. I mean, not enough for me to, other than to tell the funny story. I mean, okay, rock. It was cool. Yeah. It was actually one of the first music games.
Really?
It has continuous background that sounds like music. And you can't say that, Flash has a continuous background, but you wouldn't call it music unless you're like Trent Reznor. It's cool, but it's not really music. But rock makes something that sounds like music. Yeah. And it was really one of the first that had even a continuous background that was music.
That's great. I know we jumped straight into kind of talking about you working in games, but what's your background in relation to music? Did you go to school for music? You've been a musician your whole life? You play instruments? What's the background?
Well, yeah. I mean, my mom and dad brought the mighty Lowry organ to our house when I was 9 years old, and I played it, and I practiced, and I took lessons, and I had a egg timer. One of those timers, and I would turn it to like 30 minutes, and then I would sit and practice. And then when my mom wasn't looking, I would take 5 minutes off of it. I don't want to do this. But I got into I embraced it after a while. And then my parents, God bless them, took the mighty organ to the school so I could participate in a talent contest. And I won, But the important thing was that somebody who was in a rock band out of my high school saw me that I could play the organ. So they invited me to be in their rock band. And that's really it. I had to join the union. We actually played jobs where, we made money and stuff. And we learned lots and lots of Rolling Stones tunes. And it never looked back on that. It changed everything for me.
So is this that just off the boat clip you sent? Is that
lots of things happen between being in bands. I mean, I actually got into a band when I was in high school that was like playing a lot of commercial jobs. 2 and 3 times a week I was out playing jobs at night. That was great. Then I went to college for 4 years. My first year I actually was, you wait for the jokes. I was an organ major. Then I discovered that's an insane thing to be. And so then I didn't do that anymore. As soon as I graduated, I said, screw it. I am going to just be a musician because that's what I like doing. And so I did that for 7 years. It was back in the day. Oh, so long ago. 1972, right, when I graduated, the world was different, and all the major hotel chains had a lounge, as part of the hotel, and the lounge had a bandstand. And there, all the Marriotts and the Ramada Inns, they all had a place where a band could play, and they would typically have a band play there. In Chicago, because of the union, only 5 nights a week. On the road, you play 6 nights a week. And I just did that. I did that a bunch, and then I joined rock bands that I really liked, and we played some original tunes. So now you can play Just Off the Boat. This is a little clip from original tune by Chihuahua All-Star.
All right, here it comes.
Just off the boat, feels so strange, so late. Just off the boat.
So is that you on vocals?
No, God, I wish it was. No, it's a guy named Bobby Pyatt. He was terrific. I'm doing background vocals there, and there's some Fender piano going on. That was a lot of fun, and we played the same rock and roll circuit as like Cheap Trick before Cheap Trick made it, but Cheap Trick made it, and well, we didn't.
Had a question from chat. Attack wants to know what your first synth or piece of electronic music production equipment was.
That's a good question, because back in the day, that is like your first love. And I picked the ARP Odyssey. You had 2 choices at that time, in terms of you had 2. You could get a Mini Moog, or you could get an ARP Odyssey. And I got the ARP Odyssey because it could play 2 simultaneous notes. Mini Moog could only play
2 simultaneous notes.
Ooh,
that's fancy.
So an ARP Odyssey is twice as good.
That's
It
good.
has a different sound, and I really like that thing. And I drug that all over the place with me, and I used to do all kinds of stuff with it. When I was in lounge bands, I would use it left-handed, and I'd play bass. When I was in rock bands, well, I would just cover whatever they needed, and plus synthesis stuff. Yeah, I really had a good time with it. But it was all, totally analog. So to make a sound, you had 40 sliders across the top of it. And you want to go from a bass sound to a violin to a nasty ass lead between songs. I'm like, it was crazy. What a bizarre skill to have,
But you had to do it out of necessity, though, right?
Yeah. So yeah, Chihuahua was great fun, and I toured around the country. We opened for a bunch of bands. We opened for Blue Oyster Cult, and we opened for the biggest gig we ever worked. Well, this wasn't Chihuahua, it was a different band, but we opened for Sha Na Na at Erie Crown Theater in Chicago. It was just, like 5,000 people who came to see Sha Na Na, and we were like this 4-piece band with a chick lead singer, and the key there, keep it short. Play 5 tunes and run for your life.
How'd it go over for you guys?
It went fine, yeah, because we kept it short and we ran. It was fine, but that opportunity is gone now. You can now go out in public and play, but you sort of have to pay to do it. You can't make a living doing it. I mean, I made a living. I paid my rent, bought gas and insurance, and I did it. And I took whatever jobs I had to do in order to make that happen. And it was possible to do in the days. There were enough venues. And that just went away. So eventually I had to get at what we would refer to as a day job.
And that led to what was your first like video game project?
That was Reactor.
Okay.
So, the simple path is my first day job was at a store in Chicago. There were only 2 like this in the United States, and we just sold synthesizers. So we had all the analog synthesizers from all the different companies, and I would demonstrate them and sell them and service them and do stuff with them. And I did that for about 2 years. I'd gotten married, and I needed a real job. And all the time I was in bands and stuff, I was a huge computer hobbyist. I used to get Popular Science and Popular Electronics, and people were just beginning to get their hands on computers. And I wanted to do that so bad. And we actually sold the Apple II computer. We were the first Chicago dealer. So that's where I learned to program, because I had my hands on it, and we had terrible snows those winters, and we had no customers. And I had a Volkswagen Rabbit with front wheel drive, so I could get to the store when customers couldn't. So then I spent 8 hours a day woodshedding on the Apple II, became a programmer.
There you go.
So then I decided, okay, if I have to have a day job, I should have something more real than, retail. So I got a gig at an insurance company. And I did that for 2 years. And then I'll never know how, but a headhunter found out that I was this, computer hobbyist guy. And I liked 8-bit computers, because working in a insurance company with mainframes was a real drag. And he said, yeah, there's the game company. And so that was Gottlieb, and I got the gig. And first thing I worked on was Reactor. And then the second game I worked really hard on and was really proud of it, and they didn't even make it.
What was the name of that? Do you remember?
Oh, well, yeah, that's the funny thing. Originally it was called Video Man, but that was too close to Superman. So then they called it Protector, because that's what you did. But then that didn't test well. And then it was called Guardian, because that's like protecting. And then there was a focus group. They ended up calling it Argus. Here's a tip. If your game gets renamed 4 times, it's never going to get made.
Pro tip.
So that was crushing. But meanwhile, Warren and Jeff the artist, had come up with the Q Bert stuff. And Jeff saw it. And during Reactor, I had such a hard time with the speech chip. I had come up with that crazy voice, and I had nothing to do with it. I had it. I thought, well, that's great. I kept it in my back pocket. And then I saw what they were doing, and I said, oh, I got something for you. I got this voice. It'll be perfect for your little guy with the nose and the balls and all that stuff. So that was Q Bert, and Q Bert was the most successful coin-operated thing I've ever been involved in. They did over 30,000.
Wow.
Right?
So at this time, early in your career, were you a gamer? Were you enjoying these games? Were you playing video games, pinball, or were you just doing it for work? Or I played when I was 10 years old in Griffith, Indiana. I played pinball while waiting to get my hair cut. They had some, electromechanic thing, and I pumped probably nickels into it at that time, right? And that was pretty much the last time I played pin, because they really. I came about now. I'm out and about in the late 70s, early 80s, and video games are happening, and operators are already starting not to, in America, operate pins. Yeah.
And I was hugely fascinated with video games. I'd be in a rock band, and I'd have a break every 45 minutes, and so for 15 minutes I would go with some quarters. And at that time I was playing Depth Charge by Exidy. It was like a black and white game, and destroyers across the top of the screen dropping, and submarines and stuff. It's great fun. And so that's where I got attached to video games. So it was exciting when I could get a gig at Gottlieb.
Cool.
And
Nice.
after we had some success, we did all that stuff in a warehouse in Bensonville. Gottlieb, the company, was in Northlake, and we had this tremendous success, and they built on some more space, and they brought us in. They put us in Northlake, but they put us in all the new offices that they built, to the chagrin of all the pinball guys who've been beating their heads against the wall for the last 4 years. So they didn't like us. So I never, Trudeau was there while I was there.
Oh, wow.
All these guys were there while I was there, and the only guy I ever had any commerce with was their sound guy. Because he originally gave me, the spec for the board and said, "Go hit it, kid." And Craig was a real nice guy, and so we're sound guys under the skin, and we hung out. But otherwise, the pinball guys did not like us. And then, just to rub salt in the wounds, they had to start making pinball machines out of our video games, right? Krull, the pinball. I think they made 6 of those. It's just...
So
and Q Bert's Quest. Right?
Yeah. Well, with Q Bert, you created one of the most iconic sounds in classic video games. Like, you still hear that sound effect. It's in Wreck-It Ralph. And so what's it like for you to have such an enduring thing from so early in your career? It still means so much to so many people.
Well, I'm thrilled. How could I not be thrilled? I'm totally happy about it. The only frustrating thing is, Q Bert's probably been ported as much as any game ever. It's like on everything, every phone, every wristwatch, every console, and in all those ports, no development company, nobody has ever asked me, anything.
If they could use the sounds or anything?
Well, they don't have to ask me that.
Okay.
Sony owns the sounds, so Sony does whatever they want with them, right? But I know things about these systems, and I know things about that I could help them, because most of the time they either don't have the voice or they screw it up really bad. They never have the iconic voice. I could have helped them there, but I've been sitting around now for almost 30 years and nobody has ever asked, So, but they've treated the Q Bert property really well in the movies, in Pixels and in Wreck-It Ralph. I haven't seen the new Wreck-It Ralph. I don't even know if Q Bert made the cut. But
I think he makes a cameo at the beginning, but he's not in there much.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a question in chat from Creepy Tommy. He asked about dial-in specifically, but I'll kind of extrapolate that. What do you think about ever releasing your audio as a soundtrack that people can just listen to?
I would love it. I would absolutely love it. And I certainly hope the companies that own it do something about that. So that's the deal. Most people don't understand that most creative work is done as work for hire. There are a few people who have the traction to license their stuff for a specific use and retain the rights. That's never happened to me in my entire career. So I don't own anything, and I have no rights to do anything except I had sort of a verbal contract with Stern that I had the rights to do exactly what we're doing tonight. Here, play little excerpts for the purpose of self-promotion or education. Right, so I can give talks and seminars, and I can use these things. But otherwise, I can't do anything. And if you really like it, they aren't packaged. They aren't really set up to be on iTunes. Most of them were too short. They would need some stuff. So you tell Jersey Jack, you convince them there's enough demand for them to pay me just a little money, and I'll package them up, extend them, and make them useful iTunes tracks, and make it happen. I would love to. And this question has come up throughout my entire career. And then when the ringtones were big, people were asking about that. I said, well, talk to Jody at Stern or talk to somebody, because I got nothing for you. I wish I could control my children. I wish I could control Q Bert. There's a story. I'll tell you a story. So I was working hard on probably Krull or Mad Planets or something, and some guy from licensing at Gottlieb from the front offices, who I'd never seen before, came in my office and said, would you come to the front? I thought, uh-oh. So I went to the front, and then they sat me down and they showed me a little 8-minute segment of the Q Bert cartoon show that was on Saturday morning TV. And I looked at it and I watched it. And then he said, well, what do you think? Hey, I'm not in marketing. So I said, well, that's not how I would have handled it. They'd given him basically like a Bugs Bunny voice. He kind of New Jersey wisecracking kind of character guy. And that's just not Q Bert. That's wrong. If you're going to do Q Bert as a cartoon, he's Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp. He never talks, except he makes cryptic mumbles that you don't understand, but you can put funny subtitles up for that. And you could treat it. You could do something with Q Bert that would be great fun, right?
And that's how they treated him in Wreck-It Ralph, the first one, right? He would just make the little noise and.
Yeah. And it's great. I mean, funny subtitles. It says something, and then funny subtitles, like an airplane when they're speaking jive. It's great. Exactly. So they could have done that, but no. So yeah, that's my relationship to everything I've ever created. Is it's commercial work. They give me money. I buy groceries and pay plumbers, and they get stuff. So that's the deal.
So where do we leave off chronologically? We were talking about David's time at Data East.
Yeah.
Did we cover those?
We can jump back in with Secret Service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I derailed.
That's okay. It's fun to have a little
good derail.
diversion. So let's talk about Secret Service.
Okay, well, Secret Service was like the first experience with license, because they went out and Secret Service is okay. What is licensed? It's unlicensed, but based very loosely on any James Bond film.
Right.
Okay. And then they went out, instead of licensing a thing for the pin, they licensed 5 pieces of music that I had to try to reproduce, in 5 FM voices. And so I don't know which one. Oh, that was a thing from Mission Impossible.
Yeah, we've got a clip of it here we can play if you'd like. Let's see. Secret Service.
All right, there you go.
There you go. You
Mission
nailed it.
Impossible. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so, Secret Agent Man and, a bunch of tunes. And that was kind of fun. I think I don't know what it cost them, but I thought that was a decent license to have, and it was fun to do.
So next
okay.
up,
I mean, is that the first time that like a licensed music was used in a pinball machine?
Maybe.
It's got to be close.
Yeah. I think it is. I gave that talk like in 2008, and Steve Ritchie was in the audience, and then he started waving his arms and gesticulating wildly to tell me how Midway had licensed Peter Gunn for that driving game.
Spy Hunter. Spy Hunter. Yeah, I had one unfortunately for a while.
Yeah, so that's prior art. Somebody else had licensed the tune and put it in a coin-op game. That had happened. But for pinball, certainly in terms of scale, 5 tunes. I mean, we even at the end, for the end, we use Nobody Does It Better, and we even do a sing-along at the end. We put the lyrics up, and then my wife at the very, very end goes, "Baby, baby, you're the best."
That's great. So the sing-along, we're going to get back to, we talked about Time Machine, but really that's how we connected originally. Was you had watched our Time Machine video on YouTube and commented, and I was like, we were being idiots and singing along and just doing what we do.
Jay and Jeff were singing along.
And Martha.
Okay, I was,
I used the royal we. It wasn't
the royal we.
us.
Okay, I just want to clarify that for the viewers.
Yeah, and then you commented, and that just blew my mind. So, do you actively go out there and see videos of your how did you find us? I guess selfishly enough, I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, here's one of the other deals. First off, you don't own anything you do. And then when you work in coin-op, your work's going to be appreciated in environments where some high percentage of the time, nobody will ever hear your work. Okay. And that's hard, right? I mean, if I paint playfields, that's never optional. Everybody's going to see my painting. And if I write code, they're going to experience my code. And just nobody else is optional in a pinball game except the sound guy. And so that's a knife to my heart. That's hard. Fine. I've come to terms with it, and we're still trying to do better, right? We're still trying to get past that problem. And things are being done, and maybe we'll get even better at it. Certainly we're better at it now with better fidelity and better amplifiers and better speakers. I mean, we are doing better. But still, you go to a show, and it's like, well, I didn't hear the audio. You didn't hear the audio.
So you kind of encouraged me to go for direct audio, and I've taken that to heart. I've tried to start doing that.
Well, I seek out your Twitches, right? Because a lot of times you guys will play through to parts of the game that I never get to. and I also I just want to hear how it sounds in context, and I also want to see how people are responding to it. You guys are my focus group, and I really love it. So I watch more than you think, because I work in a studio by myself. I get out to arcades once in a while, but there isn't the kind of connected computing, and Twitch has really made a huge difference. I'll tell you another product where that was even way more, but we'll get to that.
Okay. All right. So we did Secret Service. Let's jump into Torpedo Alley. This is one of my favorite weird games to play when I go to Pinbury every year.
This is the funkiest submarine in the Navy. Claude Fernandez. This is like one of the only games designed by somebody who wasn't Mr. Kamenko. And for that reason, I will say that it didn't really get the same kind of marketing push as the others. So I think they only made like 1,000 of them. But Claude did. I think he'd been a designer at Bally. I don't know his history, but he was a real good guy. I liked him, and we made this wacky submarine game. The best story is on that back glass. I don't know.
Some nice spandex.
Oh, yeah.
In that back glass.
The spandex. Well, just understand that the guy in that picture had the same spandex as the girls.
I believe it.
And it was just too much. So then they painted cuffs on him.
I have a running theory that everybody in those photorealistic Gottlieb or Data East back glasses is just like Janet from accounting, and like anybody they could pull out and just throw in the picture. Like, who are these people in the pictures?
Oh, they're models.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah, for the Data East stuff, the designer there really, really wanted to make motion pictures, and so the story on Secret Service, that picture, that back glass, right? That was taken in Madison, Wisconsin. See,
Come on.
this isn't a time before Photoshop. And if you don't paint it, if you're going to do it with a photograph, you got to get pretty close in the picture to it. You can, with an X-Acto knife and some paint, you can do a few things, but you can't do what you do now. Well, it turns out that the Capitol building in Wisconsin, in Madison, looks a great deal like the one in Washington. So we packed up a school bus with technicians and makeup people and costuming and actors that he'd hired. There were like 25 of us to take that picture, and we drove up to Madison.
Sorry. That's amazing.
This is really good.
The guy that wrote the operating system is in that picture. His wife, and Lonnie, the 4 yellow Russian clowns hanging out of the Mercedes. That's us, the programmers. And they gave us real guns.
Oh,
and an armorer. And the armorer made sure the guns could not fire. But I had the only time I've ever held like an automatic weapon in my hand was hanging out of the Mercedes in the top of Secret Service.
Who's that?
In Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
In Madison, Wisconsin. And then the shot went on until like 3:30 in the morning. And the actor and the babe, the model, were like union people. And they were going crazy because we were abusing them. Actually, I have a prop. I have a prop for this. They were so gung-ho. Let's see.
Look at that.
Oh.
They made this card, right? And then they had like a car made for it.
That is so good.
Wow.
How many of those exist? I want one.
I don't know. I was going through an old box in my garage just like this summer. Designed and manufactured in Chicago, Illinois, pinball capital of the world.
I'm going to have to go on eBay for one of those before everybody hears this.
Get digital stereo.
Oh, yeah. It's so good. So whose red car was that? In the photo.
They rented that car. That's a Ferrari that they rented for this shoot. I mean, they were all in on this. They spent a bunch of money to take a still picture.
This is amazing. This is blowing my mind.
This is the stuff we want. Yeah.
Now, I'm only guessing, but I don't think the Premiere Pictures ever had that budget. What do you think?
Do you think the folks over at Premiere Gottlieb, when they saw that, they're like, God damn it. They did it again.
They got us again.
I know.
Meanwhile, they're making Genesis.
They got Genesis. They got Bad Girls, but
Bad Girls they went all
Bad
out
Girls,
for, though.
Bad Girls is good.
All right, let's see. Next
so did
game
you
up.
Play Torpedo Alley?
Let's play some Torpedo Alley. All right, so that's it's a multi-ball music, right?
Yeah. It's like the funkiest submarine in the Navy.
So good. So next up, we're going to talk. We talked about Time Machine quite a bit, so let's move on to Monday Night Football. So what's the story behind this one?
Well, that was the last one that I did, and I was also the designer and the programmer for the operating system on the soundboard. So you need something that talks to the chip, and you need a sequencer to play, your intention, your compositions, and all the interactivity that's possible came from how elaborate I made that sound system. And by the fifth game, I keep adding stuff, and it kept getting better and cooler. I could do more stuff. So Monday Night Football, in my entire career to this date, 2018, is the most interactive sound package I ever made. And I have to tell you that because it's such a sleight of hand that you'd never know. It just sounds really musical. It's like a totally musical game, right? So many of the things that are rewarded for making through lanes or doing this or doing that, some kind of cool fanfare or some kind of thing. And everything sounds right. It's tempo synced and it's pitch synced and it's all very graceful. So it's more like a music game than anything else I have ever done. And it's the way I would want to do a music game now if I wanted to do a music game.
I'm surprised there hasn't been a Rock Band game where you just build a song by hitting certain objectives. People love those rhythm games.
Okay, there's two problems. One are those assets, right? Like I just sort of suggested, I don't really want to do a music game. If you pay me, I will do it, but it's not a project that I would seek out. I mean, I've done some, like Rolling Stone and like AC/DC. I've done a few. But it's somebody said on Pinside today, is this, that pinball never gets in more trouble than it tries to be something other than pinball. And music games are kind of like the merger between the pinball machine and the jukebox, right? And so the assets are treated so reverentially, we're just going to play the music, that it, all the power, all the things you could do with sound to make a pinball game exciting, your hands are slightly tied because you don't want to muck up the music.
Mm-hmm.
But I would do that. I mean, I would love to take a game with some really famous sound music assets and scramble them, play them in reverse. Don't play a small percentage of them. Do something crazy, right? And as you play through the mode, as you begin qualifying things, you begin reducing the chaos, and then you end up with the tune partly as your reward. That's just like one notion. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could do, but first off, you have to get the charter to even be able to touch the assets, and nobody wants to do that. And then maybe the licensor won't let you do that either. You'd need a licensor who you bring me into the room and I do the song and dance. And I convince them what a cool interactive thing this would be.
So Monday Night Football is your last game at Data East, and then we take a big jump to 2006 and Pirates, right?
Yeah.
So what happened in the interim, and what was the story behind that?
Well, to be frank, Data East was a challenging client. I'll just let that sink in. And they really were, they were sucking down resources, and the money that we got to do it just didn't make sense for us at that stage in our company's development. So we cut them loose. And then shortly after, they hired Lonnie, and Lonnie's been at Data East, Sega, Stern since, And Lonnie's a great guy, and I love Lonnie dearly. So then I didn't do any pinball. I did a bunch of video games until I left, and Microsoft hired me, and I became a sound researcher.
What does a sound researcher do?
Well, I was a member of the Advanced User Interface Group. What's that mean? Well, how can you make computers better? right? Using advanced software techniques, graphics, sounds. That's why I was there. Tim Skelly was there. I mean, that's partially why I was there. And the very first thing they were doing that was already in progress when I got there was they were working on what they called the personified user interface. We've all come to know it as Siri or Alexa or whatever, right? Personified, meaning you're not dealing with some pointy graphic-y things or typing in command lines. You're literally carrying on with some kind of thing in the computer, and you think you're having a conversation. Well, we were working on that in '93. We actually had voice recognition working sort of well enough. And unlike Alexa or Siri, we had a character. Yes, this work did inspire the paperclip.
I was gonna. I mean, you knew it was coming.
Chat room's calling it out already. They knew it was coming.
I know. Clippy. Yes, this work did inspire that. And I know why Clippy failed. I mean, we could discuss that at length, but that's not pinball. So we had a parrot, and Petey the parrot was the guy. I could have sent you a clip. Petey the parrot, and you talked to Petey, and Petey would assemble a playlist for your CD.
Oh, wow.
So it was sort of like a database app, right? Because we knew about 100 CDs, and we had deep knowledge about the CDs. We knew the names of the tracks, but we knew who played bass and that kind of stuff. It was available. And you could talk to Petey and, have a conversation about play some classical, how about some Debussy, blah, 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 blah. And he would talk back. Well, the problem was the speech technology at its time wasn't any better than the stuff we used at Q Bert. Here it is, how many years later? It's 10 years later, and speech synthesis technology is still dreadful. Nobody has anything that doesn't sound horribly robotic. And we have a parrot. This is not going to work. So I did the research. I spent like 3 months so I could say that. I could say that, no, you can't buy for love or money. You cannot get any technology that will allow the computer to speak in anything other than a robotic voice.
Just make a robot.
We brute forced the problem, and we just recorded everything Petey needed to say as a parrot.
So who was the parrot voice? You? Oh, yeah. Amazing. Now,
I have no Debussy.
I did. So Microsoft spent all this money and relocated me and my wife and our 8 cats to Redmond so that I could be a parrot. That's how that went down.
That's
a hell of a story.
Yeah, it is. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I didn't either. I had no idea when I took the gig but you do what you got to do at some point. You just want this to work. And I did a lot of other stuff. And frankly, I have a bachelor's degree in speech, and technical theater. So I can put up lights, and I can paint scrims and build sets. And I mean, that was my real degree. And I'm shoulder to shoulder with all these PhDs. So it took me a while. It took me several years to figure out how to be a researcher. I mean, normally for all those guys, it took them 7 years to get their degree. So it took me a while, learn the literature, and write papers, describe experiments, participate in research. That's what I did. And after I finally could say I could do that, it was like 2000, and I said, I hate doing this. I don't like being a researcher. My entire life has been producing something for you, and it's the thing I produce is the thing. Research is about the process, how I did it. You're going to challenge me on how I did it and stuff. And the thing I produce is it's not really that important. It's the process and how you can describe it, and the scientific method will challenge it and see if somebody else can duplicate your results, blah, blah, blah. So I decided, that's just not me. And so I retired from Microsoft in 2000, and then I really retired for about 5 years, and I got into woodworking. It was a passionate hobby thing, and I built a lot of things, designed and built a lot of things. And the console I'm using right here is a desk that I built. And I mean, in the back of my mind, I knew I was going to get back into this because I couldn't retire for the rest of my life. And so I was beginning to build up a studio, the ability to make sounds and do things. And then Chris Granner retired from Stern in 2006 after one Steve Ritchie game. I just let that drop.
Let that hang right there.
No. Steve's not that hard. Steve's a sweetheart. And it's who you know, right? And I knew Lonnie. I knew Lonnie from that company where we were doing all the game console stuff, and also from Incredible Technologies. But more importantly, another guy that worked at Action Graphics, this company where we did the ColecoVision and all that stuff, was a guy named Pat Lawler.
Heard of him.
Yeah, and he hadn't done a pinball yet. I mean, he was finding himself. And he really, Pat's a real brilliant guy at game design, but he wasn't the best programmer. And at that time, you really needed to be a good programmer to make these limited 8-bit systems dance. So he was only at Action Graphics for about 6 months, 8 months, I don't know. But I met him and I knew him. So he was going to do Family Guy for Stern. And so he talked to Lonnie and he said, hey, what's David doing? Right. So it's who you know.
So that brings us to the first Pirates of the Caribbean.
That brings us to the first, oh my God. Yes, the first Pirates of the Caribbean. Did you play, you played Shoot the Bomb. Did you play Monday Night Football?
Did we play?
No, we did not.
No, we didn't. All right, let's go.
I've never played that pinball machine. I've never seen one.
They had it at Expo. That's the
I
only
really
place
want to play it
played
now.
Yeah. All right, here we go. There you go. Shoot the bomb.
Shoot the bomb. So that's the big shot, right? You've qualified, you've locked balls, you've done all this stuff, and there's this one ramp, and you shoot that, and you get 1,000,000 points.
Nice.
Shoot the bomb. The way all Data East games were,
Exactly.
You qualified all this stuff, and you got one shot, make 1,000,000 points.
Woohoo! Did it. All right, so tell us about the Pirates of the Caribbean Stern journey that you went on.
Oh, God. Well, it's been 17 years now since I really had spent quality time with the pinball machine. I'd been busy. and so they fly me to Chicago, and I meet Dwight Sullivan, who is a trip. You have to Dwight is like a lot more organized now than he was then in 2006. There is no, you have to follow Dwight's lead because he'll never follow yours. And Dennis is designed for this. I mean, I was familiar with like Data East games, right? Pirates of the Caribbean, I mean, in any terms, is a kind of a whack design. There's a lot of crazy nonsense going on there. And I was just 17 years, oh my God, what has happened? Then plus the sound system is so totally different. This is now a recorded sound system. All it does is playback recordings, which puts all the work into my studio. And right away, I have to be an orchestra. I'm a lounge musician. No, we need orchestra because they're not going to get any of the music from the movie. And I don't want to say too much about why that's true, but I do want to say it's not Disney's fault.
Okay.
It's interesting. Disney is the enforcer, right? You deal with Disney licensing, and they have probably a 12-story building in Orlando or near Disneyland, right? And all those people do are exploit intellectual property. They are really good at it. They are remarkably good at it. From every Mickey plush toy to every 101 Dalmatians lunchbox to whatever. They're just really good at it. And so, so what did we get from Pirates of the Caribbean to make a Pirates of the Caribbean game? For sound, it's easy. Nothing.
Wow.
Doesn't it play a little clip of the main theme when you're in the shooter lane?
It does, right?
Well, okay. Well, we got two things. I don't want to say nothing. The one thing we got was the rights to hire a guy who sounds more like Jack than Johnny Depp does. I mean, the guy's great. So we got to use that impersonator. And then we got to use, and here's the wackiness about licensing. We didn't deal directly with like the theme park guys to license their tune, because that was a theme park ride, right?
Right.
The Yo-Ho tune?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. No. What we got rights to use were the bits of the Yo-Ho tune that were featured in the movie.
Interesting.
Now think about that. If you know the movie at
Yeah.
all,
Unfortunately, I do.
the little girl only sings a little bit, a fragment of it at the front. Jack and what's her name dance around drunkenly around a fire when they're cast away on that island, and they sing a little bit more of it. That's about it. But they never sing the whole tune. So I never had like all complete verses or anything. What a wacky license. And that was what we got. Then, just to make life more interesting, they did give us the creative freedom to create these pirate characters, right, that were not in the movie. So there's a Blackbeard. We had a Blackbeard pirate. We had a French, like Clouseau kind of pirate, silly French pirate. And we had a female pirate, maybe two female pirates. And we had a British effete, you know, somebody with like handkerchiefs coming out of his sleeve kind of pirate, right? And then those were the modes, and each one of them had a ship, right? And so that's how you get some stuff going on. And they all had a bunch of lines. And so we wrote a bunch of lines, and we hired a guy. The Dadies hired a guy from, which is a tradition in Chicago pinball, somebody from Second City.
Okay.
The improv comedy place.
Yep.
And they saw what we were doing, and they wrote a bunch of stuff, and we got it down to some scripts. Great. Then we had these recording sessions, and we recorded all this stuff. Well, first you send the scripts off to Disney, and the licensing group in that tall building in Florida approves it. And you get it back and you say, okay, good. Now we went off and had all these recording sessions, and we recorded it. Then, back in the day, they were localizing in speech to 4 more languages.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Well, this is my first thing, right? And I'm like, it's blowing, I don't know that that's crazy. I just think, oh, that's what you're doing. Okay, fine. But you get some guy who's bilingual. He speaks French and he speaks English. And you get him from an agency, and he's primarily there. What his normal gig is to like telephone, directory and those kind of systems in French. So they have it in multiple languages. The high order bidder, he's not an actor. He's just a guy who speaks English and French. And I get 4 of these. And I'm trying, what do you tell the French guy when you want him to be the silly French pirate?
It's a fun conversation.
I tell him to sound like the stupid British one or something. I mean, it was just a nightmare. So we got all this stuff recorded, and here's the punchline. Meanwhile, in somewhere, that script has now migrated to Disney Creative, people involved with the film franchise. And they look at that script and they go, oh, no. We're such much better writers than you. And they start blue lining this script, changing things and eliminating things and stuff that can't be said and all this stuff.
I want to stop you right there for a minute. I've seen some of the movies. I'm trying to make my way through them, and I don't know what was in that script. They're not better writers than you. Okay? My God.
No, hey, I'm not. Hey, that's cool. The first film. Okay. So the punchline for this. So we get this blue line script back from Disney Creative, and now the rule is, well, unless we re-record all of that stuff, we can't use the lines they've changed.
Oh wow!
So about 30% of our stuff ended up on the floor because we weren't going back through that insane, expensive, time-consuming process and re-record the things that Disney Creative changed. Okay.
The joys.
There you go. That's a story.
All right, so let's hear a little bit of Pirates. This is Tortuga.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I don't remember it from the game. Do you?
I do
When it
not.
plays? Yeah, I don't.
When does that one play?
That's why I played it. Well,
Okay.
there's two reasons why I played it. Number one was I'm new to this orchestra thing, and by the time I got to that tune, I had learned how to use woodwinds. And so that features a saucy clarinet. And
Very
so
saucy.
I'm really proud. I really think, I mean, I like it, and I was expanding my vocabulary. So that's one reason. And the second reason you never heard it is because that's when the ball goes up in that mix master up in the upper left-hand corner where multiple balls go and there's all those targets. That's playing underneath that. But first off, the mech makes noise.
Yeah.
And then every time you hit a switch, that's blowing up things on the screen, making sound effects and stuff. So you have like zero chance of ever hearing that music. Not a possibility.
Yeah, because there's like sword swinging sounds and cannons and stuff up there.
Yeah,
right?
That's funny, man.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
So you put all this time and effort into creating a piece of audio that you probably won't ever hear.
Get used to interaction, boys. That's just
Love it.
so.
All right, so that takes us to what a lot of folks consider one of the funniest pinball machines ever made, and that's Family Guy, right?
Yeah, it was. I was really enthusiastic about the project. I wasn't a fan of the show before I started this. I watched an episode or two, and kind of like my relationship with The Simpsons, The Simpsons are funny, but just kind of too mean and close to reality, and it makes me sad, so I can't watch The Simpsons. And now I've got to do this license on Family Guy, but I started watching it, and then I began to appreciate what I call joke density, right? Family Guy's joke density is way higher than The Simpsons. You don't go for very many seconds before, bam, there's something, and then something else, and then bam. Joke density is very high in Family Guy. And then I think it acknowledges short attention span theater, where we have a new audience who's not really good for more than about 12 seconds. So in Family Guy, they have an overall arc of a story they're trying to tell, but they doubt that their audience can even pay attention that long. So then they drop into, remember that time when we went to the carnival, and they just drop in a whole new joke just because we don't think you have the time or attention to like wait for a punchline for, until the commercial. So there's a lot of cool stuff about Family Guy, and I really became a fan of the show, and I've seen it all. So
Well, you got Seth MacFarlane to record all sorts of sound and voice for that, right?
Well, yes. Yeah. I didn't, most of these clips are music because, people typically don't buy sound effects records and like hang out with them. They, buy music. And even at that, this is instrumental music. And how many people listen to just instrumental music? But I just listened. Chris Granter did a podcast with
I heard
the
it was
boys.
the head-to-head podcast. That was a great one.
Yeah, and I didn't get through the whole thing, but he thinks that the Simpsons call-out package is just the best. Let's agree to differ, Chris.
Shots fired.
When you can get Seth MacFarlane to do 7 different voices and read all custom lines and get about 600 of them, and the lines are good. I mean, the writing is good as well. I think we may have invoked the Second City again. So, just play the clip, and I'll stand on my laurels.
All right, here we go. A little
They're
Family
not my
Guy.
laurels, they're Seth's.
You're making a mockery of this game.
Wonder how they keep those balls so shiny.
Multi-ball. I like the sound of that.
Tonight's top story, Man Bangs Machine. Film at 11.
Unleash the silver orbs.
Basically, you should look at my map is the main bullet point of this presentation.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, it's good. I would declare the winner to be Family Guy.
The whole package, and it was like crushing to me that it wasn't at the time on its initial run all that, commercially successful. Since then, I found out that my good friend Jack was kind of part of this, right? That's why there is Shrek, because Jack's a Family Guy, ironically, but
Jack Winery,
right? And he just was not comfortable even selling it, I don't think. And so, they had some parts left over, and so he said, well, let's make Shrek. But I've been told, then I discovered that once the game got out there, and particularly in locations and stuff, that then there was more of a demand for it, and it went back into production. So I never knew that part of it. And so there are more Family Guys than I thought there were, and I feel better about it.
There you go. So let's move into a game that's sitting right behind us over here. It's Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah. Well, Steve Ritchie game. And I get a call from, I think, Lonnie in Chicago, and says, you got to come to Chicago. And I don't come to Chicago for these. Distance collaboration, I can do it. I just have broadband and a machine, I can do it. So no, you got to come. It's like, why? He said, well, Steve's not really sure he wants to use you for the sound. You got to talk to him. Press some flesh. Okay. So I flew to Chicago and talked with Steve, and we got down to it. It's a little hard, because Steve is a little hard of hearing, but we managed to communicate. And his problem was that he didn't like what I had done for Pirates, and Family Guy's not his kind of game either. So I think he was having a hard time imagining that I could do something that would suit him. And I told Steve, I said, listen, I did what the team wanted. That yo-ho thing with the little girl singing in the front and stuff, that's what Dwight and Dennis wanted. And, if Steve had done a Pirates game, if Steve had done Pirates of the Caribbean, imagine that, You press the start button, avast ye, mateys, bend over. Yeah, it's just like, Steve, Steve's pirate game would have been crazy different than Dennis's and Dwight's. So I said, hey, you're the client, whatever you want. I'll do whatever you want. I do, I'm a commercial musician. None of these games sound like David Thiel games. They all suit the metaphor. They do what you guys need. So, okay. So he said, okay, well, I think I was on probation at that point. And then I started writing music for Spider-Man. He decided that he didn't want the Danny Elfman stuff. And I think he was right. It would have been expensive anyhow. It wasn't really pinball-y, and it wasn't really, I don't want to say bad things, but it wasn't Danny Elfman and the director by that point in the franchise were like having conflicts, and so it really wasn't his best stuff either. All right. So he wanted all original stuff, Spider-Man music, Steve Ritchie Spider-Man music. So I started writing things and submitting them, and I get this like phone call. Well, Dave, yeah, that's okay, but I can't use it. Okay. So did something else, pretty much another negative response. And I usually don't have this kind of rejection rate, so I said, okay, I got to figure this out. And at that time, there was like PinMame. See, my problem is I had this like 17-year gap in my pinballness.
Okay.
And I missed a golden age. I think we're in another golden age, but I certainly missed a golden age. I missed a lot of Steve's stuff. So I downloaded a bunch of Steve's stuff on PinMame, and I played it. I just played a couple of them, right? And I go, oh, that's Steve Ritchie music.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. And the next one he accepted. And then after he liked one, then he liked the rest of them. And frankly, I didn't write Steve Ritchie music, I think, the way Steve would have had he, come into my office with his guitar and said, make something like this. But I think he liked it, and I certainly liked the result. And I think we were both real happy, and I thought it worked out.
It's got fantastic music in that game. I mean, I always keyed in on it when I got into pinball, and I was like, man, that game has got good music in it.
Yeah, let's hear a little bit of it.
Steve Ritchie is like wailing guitars.
Oh yeah, that's what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that's the only game that I've ever used a live musician on that wasn't me. I found a friend of mine had a guitar teacher who was teaching him how to play rock guitar, and he was a terrifically good guy, and I can't even think of his name right out of hand. But I went to his house. and I had made some backing tracks, and he cranked up his thing to like 110 dB, and I'm recording it, and I came away from that like half-hour session with everything I needed for Spider-Man.
That's great.
So that was very cool. I really enjoyed that one, and I thought that worked out great.
Awesome. Right. It's time for everybody's favorite game.
Everybody's
Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah, Wheel of Fortune.
I want one of those, by the way.
I know. I kind of do too.
Maybe one day.
Well, you find your fun wherever you can find it, and there's a bunch of fun left on the floor because, about that time things were starting to get wonky financially and stuff, and Keith never really had a chance to finish it. Then Keith was laid off, and then Keith was just not going to finish it. The fun in that game were the mode things, the trips. You win a prize, right? And then you go on one, because they do this on Wheel of Fortune. You're going to go to Las Vegas, and and so we had all these really funny trips and these crazy locations. Like you went a trip to Area 51. That was one of them. And one of my favorites was the African trip. And the theme that I wrote for that one was like these natives. And it was as if they had their own Wheel of Fortune show, because there are literally spin-offs in all countries. There's a French Wheel of Fortune and a Yugoslavian. So the African one, they're all going, big money, big money, big money, big money, big money. Wheel! They're all singing. But this one, the one I picked, Dennis had requested, he thought it'd be very cool because there was a bunch of people who play instruments at Data East. And he had in his mind an expo where we all got on stage and played tunes from Wheel of Fortune. That's hard to arrange from Seattle, but I did do the blues tune, and the guy who was in support at that time, a guy named Joe, was a terrific guitarist, as it turns out. So I sent him a backing track that didn't have guitar, and he recorded that, and then I put it together, and so that's what this is, I think.
Here we go. Some classic blues there.
Yeah, so the trip tunes are a lot of fun. You go to the Las Vegas Pinball Hall of Fame, and so there's some, like Las Vegas music, and you can hear like pinball machines in the background, electromechanical ones. You went to Australia, and I think half of these never even got programmed.
Oh man,
that's a shame.
That's too bad hearing that.
Yeah. Plus, it had the other thing, which never got exploited, but it had that cool character, some number of 10 character alphanumeric display, like almost between the flippers.
Yeah. Where
all kinds of very cool stuff could have been communicated to you about game goals and things. I mean, that pre-visions some of the things we're doing now, and it just has silly stuff on it. It never really got used because it needed more time.
All right, let's talk Indiana Jones.
Yes, Indiana Jones, The Return.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to talk. Yeah, I don't want to talk about its deficiencies, which are huge. But the piece of music that I wrote, they had this crazy ramp, and they had this thing, and I thought there was going to be like a mine car from maybe the second movie. All the Indian kids were enslaved in a thing, and they were all in mines and stuff. And so I wrote this John Williams-like mine car hurry-up music, and then they didn't implement the mode. So I think it got used for entering your initials or something. But it was one of my favorite things that I wrote for this game.
All right, let's check it out. All right, so that's the mining car hurry up turned initials entering sound.
Hurry up and enter your initials.
That's right.
30 seconds.
Yeah. We could talk about how that train wreck happened, but I don't think we will.
It might be a whole episode.
Yeah, we'll bring you back to talk about Indiana Jones.
Sad.
let's
CSI was Pat Lawler's last contracted game. He had signed a package deal for some number of games from PLD, and at Family Guy, his sort of company the wheels began falling apart, because it was his notion that PLD, out way the hell out where he lives, was going to create machine one, and then it was just going to go to Stern, and they were just going to manufacture it. That was his idealized dream, and that didn't work out. And he lost his programmer on Family Guy, so now he had lost like control of the project. So by the time he gets to Family Guy or CSI, he's not like a happy camper, and he didn't really even finish it.
What was it like at Stern at this point? You're in the middle of the economic recession, and you're coming out with stuff like CSI and Wheel of Fortune, and it's like, what was it like working there?
Well, yeah, CSI is really right where the crash happens. I mean, things were still, there was a lot of pressure and time pressure, and that's why Wheel of Fortune I don't think gets done. CSI, I don't know. I mean, it was just the guy who created the show creator, the showrunner, is a pinhead, loves pinball. He was the one who approached Stern and said, I can get you all these assets. I would love for there to be a CSI pinball machine.
Interesting.
Huh.
It's not the worst idea in the world.
No.
And it could have been done better. And he did give us incredible assets. Like, I didn't write a piece of music for CSI. CSI is this bizarre show with at least 2 montages per episode. And a montage is like a series of images and some music, and there's no dialogue. So there's nothing to mess up the music, no sound effects, no dialogue, just music. And then images showing you how to lift fingerprints from something or use this machine. I mean, remember they did that all the time.
Okay.
So there would be 2 or 3 of those clips of music available per show, and I had 60 shows to pull from. Wow. So I had like 180 pieces of music that we got down to some dull roar that were suitable for pinball, that were really kind of cool.
That's awesome.
But the piece of music that I picked is, we got the rights for the Who Are You tune, but we didn't get the recording. So this is me recreating the Who Are You, and that's my falsetto. So go ahead.
All right, let's hear this. I think you nailed it.
Yeah,
I'm
For
sold.
pinball, it's close enough. You
Yeah.
can't hear it anyhow, but
That's good.
For the 10 people that own a CSI pinball machine, they might know.
That's right.
Yeah. So, okay. I do want to say NBA, I really liked NBA. And Lonnie, so NBA was done out of, they got rid of everybody. Lonnie was the only one left. Borg was even gone, laid off. I didn't work there, right? So they look back and say, okay, well, we could turn Space Jam into a game. And they brought Borg back maybe as a consultant. Then they rehired him again. And I never played Space Jam. But the thing you have to understand is I think Borg, did a great job with that playfield. That basket thing, he got it so there's now 3 ways to use it. You can go up the ramp here, drop it in. You go this way and drop it in. You go from the front and make baskets. So the basket mechanism is being used a lot now, and it's a lot more fun. And the second part, it was a passion project for Lonnie. Lonnie is a huge basketball person. So we made, a basketball game, and we invented all this stuff, and it's really fun. I liked this game, and it really crushed me, that nobody else did, as far as I could tell. I was standing at a show in Tacoma, Seattle Center, and watching somebody play it, and they got about halfway through it, and they walked away. And I liked it a lot. And the sound package is really nifty from my point of view. It's very interactive, and the game is always going from offense to defense. And so the background in the stadium changes to kinds of chants and backgrounds they have, and there's like 30 of them.
Wow.
And then and I had the opportunity to do that thing, right, to write that theme, because all these things are based on TV. The only way everybody knows basketball is through television. So CBS or NBC or whatever has their basketball music. It's all big and brassy and stuff. And so I got to write one of those. And I like the one I wrote. So that's what I
Here we go.
shared with you.
I'm ready to hit the court. I don't know about you.
It's sports.
It's sports.
Yeah, it's sports. It's that thing, right? There's a certain thing you do to make those, and I figured it out. And so I really enjoyed that one.
And then Tim Kitzrow, the announcers from NBA Jam, right?
Yes.
And awesome.
And he knocks it out of the park.
Oh, he's great.
He's been there and he'd done it. One of the links I gave you, I made a video that has more of that stuff.
We'll put that in
a lot of Tim Kitzrow.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for folks listening later, or the YouTube description down below.
It's just awesome. Tim, I mean, it's a great sound package for a game that's fun to play.
It's unfortunate that you can't really find these or have access to them. I think it's a fun game. I like this era of Stern where it's a little simpler gameplay. It's not terribly long game times. Like, it sort of resonates with me. So I like the game. It's fun. Just don't get to play it.
Yeah. So I'll let this one's all you.
Yeah,
this is your baby right here.
Yeah,
it's Iron Man.
My first pinball machine was Iron Man. I got it in January 2011, and that's kicked off the sickness addiction. And I absolutely loved the sound and the music in this game. And I know a lot of it's actually from the movie. So I read a magazine article around the time where you kind of talked about this using a lot of the movie's assets and sounds. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, at the beginning of these things, I'm there and they're all there, and we all kind of listen and we begin drawing up the war plans. And initially, I'd seen the movie. I liked the movie a lot. I'd seen the movie, and my memory, maybe I saw the movie 4 months before, and I was just like, the music didn't stick with me. And so I was thinking, I'm not sure you need to license it, right? So John Borg didn't agree with me. And I start getting these emails where he's sending me these pointers to YouTube clips, which are, that track with one still graphic, and basically it's a soundtrack track from Iron Man. He must have sent me 6 of these, right? So now I'm listening to it, and all of a sudden it came to me, I was totally wrong, because Ramin Djawadi is this German-born Iranian composer who comes out of Hans Zimmer's stable, had written this music that was so powerful. It was really coin-op music. But in the movie, because it was so powerful, they had to nerf it.
Interesting.
They mixed it down. They buried it in sound effects, the dialogue. You really, it didn't, once it's there and you watch the movie, and then you're turned on by it. But if you just watch the movie, it doesn't have a chance to shine because it's kind of buried. Because if they didn't bury it, it's just so powerful it would cause attention to itself. So I made 180. I totally agreed with John. And ever since then, I've always said, I'm not always right. And John was totally right. And so we got the number of tracks that we could get. And then that was, sliced and diced into as many modes as we could. Except the next movie was coming, and that wasn't, we didn't have any assets from that movie. And all I ever saw of War Machine was a trailer with what's his name and his crazy whips and stuff.
Whiplash, Whiplash.
Yeah, Whiplash. So I had to write a Whiplash theme, and then I had to write this War Machine thing that was in the same style as the Ramin Djawadi stuff. And I like it. I like.
So
that
I
was
think
a lot of fun.
I think that was I think that's a really good decision. I love the music in that. I think it's very bass heavy. It sounds really good. You hook up a subwoofer to the game, it sounds fantastic. And Ramin, if that's how you say his name, I mean, he's gone on. He's done the intro to Game of Thrones. So many people have heard his work. He did the intro to Westworld, and I'm sure so many other things out there. So it's awesome that you were able to incorporate that into the pinball machine.
Well, of the contemporary film composers, he's my favorite, no doubt, without a doubt. I'm not a big Hans Zimmer fan,
But this is an original piece that you wrote for the game.
Yeah.
This War Machine.
Yeah,
All right, so
listen to
let's
that
take a
now.
listen. Some good chunky guitar there. I like it.
Yeah.
And there's something going on there that I've been doing for a very long time. I come more from using the power of the jingle, the stuff, using the power of melody and even lyric, even if you don't know what the lyric is. So if you listen to that, you can just sing along. War Machine, War Machine. And I do that a fair amount. It's a constraint on the composition that I think makes it more memorable and sometimes more appropriate. And so I don't always do it, but it's something I think about. That I'm looking for a hook.
So let's take it to Avatar.
Another game not really all that well embraced by the community, but it was the first time I had is it the first time? Yeah, I think it's the first time I had a chance to what I call channel a composer. So we licensed a few tracks from the soundtrack, and that's James Horner. He's dead now, but he's a great composer, and he did Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, fantastic score. He did Titanic. I mean, the guy's great. And when I try to channel a composer like John Williams or Horner and stuff, I obviously can't copy them. They'll be, the lawyers will be at my door, just like that. So instead, I have to, work within the style, but make original stuff. And it's something I figured out how to do. So this is the Navi multi-ball thing, and it's very Avatar-ish and stuff. But it's pinball music, which means it's more energetic, and it's a multi-ball thing.
All right, let's check it out. All right, I've been holding out for this moment now because it's time to talk Tron.
Oh, hold on one sec. I just want to say I
right.
appreciate that you guys got Stephen Lang from the Avatar movie because he does some awesome jackpot call-outs. Like he gets how to do jackpot call-outs. Did you have to coach him much on that, or was it he ran with it?
Good actors get it, right? Good actors really get it, and part of it is good actors. The other part is casting, right? Out of the people who are available that you can hire, who you can afford, we have good examples and we have bad examples. Stephen Lang, great example. Seth MacFarlane, out of the park. Something I didn't work on, but one of my canonical bad examples
I know it's coming.
is 24.
Yes. Yes. night and day.
Because she's a great actress and I like her. But she's so not pinball worthy.
Yeah.
She's kind of here and ironic and stuff, jackpot. And that's never going to work. And the thing is, it was the same problem with CSI to a lesser degree. We hired the doctor in CSI who's, has fake legs and he's a great actor. He's a really nice guy. We had a fine session. But his character's here too, He's kind of ironic and stuff. And he's an actor. I can get him to yell jackpot, and I can get him to go here. But the minute he does that, he's out of character.
Yeah.
We spent all this money licensing this character, so he sort of needs to stay in character.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the same reason why, what's his name from the insurance commercials was so good for Spider-Man. Parker, get over here.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah. And that was good casting. And you don't want Tobey Maguire. Hi. I'm Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Jackpot. It just wouldn't work. So part of it is casting, and then good actors. But anybody that we're going to cast from a movie is going to be a better actor than pretty much anybody we work with. So yes, I agree. Stephen Lang. I don't know if I want to. I think I was one of his. We got to get Stephen Lang because I'm familiar with his work forever, and he's great.
All right.
Oh, a little Disney thing.
Little Disney thing called Tron, a game near and dear to my heart. So tell us about your experience working on this game.
Well, you know, this is like day and night. See, I'd already had the license from hell, Pirates, Disney, and now we're going to do Tron, and you know, I'm already face planning. But Disney is like a small country that makes intellectual property, and depending on which state you either land in Kazakhstan or you land in someplace else. The Tron people were wonderful and liberal. They gave me like a gigabyte worth of raw sound effect material that they had contracted for the movie. They didn't give me the sound effects used in the movie. They gave me the raw material that their people used to make sound effects for the movie.
Oh, wow.
I still have it on, you know, I can't do anything with it, but I have this stuff.
So how does that work for you, putting sound effects together for the game?
Well, you know, you can't ever, for pinball, you come back to that ultimate problem, right? Is it's all going to be experienced in a noisy environment. So subtlety can never apply. And there are certain kinds of sounds which, no matter how loud you make them, they'll never work. You know, lighting a match. That's an important cue in a pinball game, you know, but it's such a thing, it'll never work.
Right.
Okay, fine. So you get all these assets, and then you you need to tell the player when they've hit a target, when they're going around an orbit, when they're going down lanes, and these things are themed in a certain way within the metaphor of the game. If you have a lot of assets that people recognize from the license, then you begin trying to find that mapping. You know, my best example was Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones, like every pinball game I've ever worked on, has slingshots. What do you use for slingshots in Indiana Jones? The whip, of course. He's got a whip, and he uses it all the time. It's perfect. So, you know, that's a sound effect, and I didn't have to – I just thought that, right? And so I found some whip samples from the movie or from somewhere else, doesn't matter. And bam, you know, the slingshots really scream Indiana Jones because they're, you know, whip cracks. So for Tron, you're looking for that mapping of, you know, a metaphor and type of mechanism and playfield motion, you know. It's different – hitting a target from going around an orbit or traveling down through lanes. Those are different, like the way the ball moves. And I like the sound to somehow mimic that within the limits of the, you know, the metaphor.
Yeah, I love the light cycle sounds as you hit the ramps and things like that. It really ties into the layout of the game and the theme of the movie, right?
Well, that was that was so, you know, some things are obvious, right? You got this kind of motion, and then light cycles. Cool. Great.
Yeah. So tell me about the bass drop when you start Cora Multiball. That's my favorite.
Well, see, they licensed music from Daft
Punk.
Daft Punk. And it was funny to me because I was not a Daft Punk fan. I mean, I was aware of them. I'd seen the things and stuff, but and see, remember, my background was selling those analog synthesizers and stuff back in 1976, 77, all that stuff that all of a sudden came back in fashion. Just all these guys doing European dance music rediscovered these sounds, and they're just doing all this stuff again, you know, just with a bigger quarter note pulse. And it was like, yeah, I can do that. I did that a long time ago. I can do that. No problem.
So
sequencing stuff. But see, then the Daft Punk soundtrack featured a lot more strings. I mean, they really stretched themselves into a more movie kind of soundtrack. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, okay, they set the rules up for what the music needed to be, but I knew I could do that. And
so this is a game that folks consider to be like one of the best music pinball machines, right? This is a game you put on and you kind of, it's like a party in a box, right? So
so the drop,
yeah,
the drop was, I mean, Daft Punk features those. I mean, that's just called drops. You can go to sound libraries now where they'll have 150 versions of a drop. and you can just pick one and drop it in your thing, right? It's a cliche in that kind of trance dance music.
Okay.
But to me, it was rather novel, and I was desperate to really knock your socks off and sound like Daft Punk, except not be Daft Punk. But I knew I had to have a drop, so I like found all the things, connected a whole bunch of stuff, and then played with it till it was like, oh yeah. And see, the other thing is I was still doing these things down in my studio, and then running upstairs where I kept the games in my garage, in an unheated garage, to test them. So I would take a USB stick and then jam it in and upgrade it and then listen to it and stuff. But that's far from being an ideal dev cycle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Especially with Stern, because I never had source. So I would make my changes, send them to Chicago. Then I just wait till some programmer would make a build, and then I could FTP that back here so I could put it on my stick. So sometimes my turnaround cycle is 4 days.
Jeez.
Just dreadful.
That's brutal.
So I was just guessing on whether the drop would hit the resonant peak of that cheesy 5-inch paper speaker that's down in the case and stuff. And maybe I had to like make a couple passes at it to find the sweet spot, but eventually, you know.
That's what I hooked this subwoofer up to it, and the first time you did it was like a transformative experience. I was like, it was literally shaking the walls in my garage. It was so awesome. So it's a standout like audio moment in pinball for me. What do you think of? So this is
die happy. Before I die, you're making me so happy.
This is a game that folks like to customize and like do remixes on and stuff like that. What do you think about people customizing the audio on their machines?
Well, I have mixed feelings, frankly, about it. You know, especially sometimes they're dealing with the deficiency of the licensing arrangement. They're very literal. Hey, I just want to hear soundtrack music. Now, even if and there are many cases where even if we could, we didn't want the soundtrack music because we just didn't think it was pinball worthy. You know, it's just kind of down here, and we need something else. You know, pinball's mostly about activity and things hitting each other and excitement and stuff. And so some film music just doesn't rise to the occasion, no matter how good it is and how memorable it is, you know, to the license. So when people swap stuff out, I'm most sensitive, I think, to Star Trek, because I really had a good time. It's one of my favorites that I got to write a completely original score. And, you know, there aren't too many metaphors I care that much about. I care about as much as Star Trek.
Okay.
Because, you know, I was 16 in 1968. I saw the original episodes when they showed them on Thursday night.
Nice.
And I'm very, very attached to that whole franchise. So the chance to be like Jerry Goldsmith or James Horner or one of those other fantastic composers and write my take on heroic Star Trek music was a shot. So when people find it lacking and replay, well, it really irritates me. They Michael Giacchini, they like the movie from the reboots. They like the music from the reboots. I don't like the music from the reboots all that much. I mean, yeah, he's perfectly fine, but I don't think he holds a candle really to James Horner or to Jerry Goldsmith, the other franchise composers that came before him. So, yeah, it doesn't make me happy, frankly, but I understand the need, but I think it's kind of a literal need, right?
Yeah, because people want to hear the things they remember from the movie or the TV show or whatever that didn't get into the machine for whatever reason, right?
Right.
So let's hear a bit. What is the clip you sent us for Tron, the Zeus Hurry Up?
Oh, this is the Zeus. Zeus Hurry Up.
All right, let's check that out.
One of the ones that kicks ass, I think.
Agreed. Here we go. It's so close to the movie soundtrack. You almost don't realize it's not.
So it's not. Is it like blended some of those elements from the movie in something that you created originally? That's 100% original.
Oh yeah.
David doesn't mess around.
Wow.
Yeah, we get the rights to a certain, you know, I don't remember. I think like whole tracks. We may get 2 or 3 tracks that I sort of Cuisinarted into modes.
Yeah.
Right. But you can only, at some point you can only extract so much out of these, or a mode like that one. That's like a hurry up. That's like a thing, and it really needs something quite specific and frantic. So I just wrote something specific and frantic in their style.
Awesome.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
All right, so another music pin. It's Rolling Stones.
Yes. Yeah. So I obviously didn't write any music for this, and I did sound effects. And okay, there is this little tiny mode, some fast scoring thing, and so I wrote a little piece that was like if the Rolling Stones made an instrumental without Mick Jagger.
All right, let's check it out.
This is.
So there you go, little instrumental Rolling Stones-ish kind of action.
Yeah, nothing spectacular. I just wanted to have something, and I wasn't going to give you any of the call-outs.
So did you have something you wanted to say about Rolling Stones?
Well, I saw Transformers come up, so I'm going to ask this for our friend Jeff. How'd you get the sound go
Thank you
on Transformers when it comes out of the scoop? Because you watch the show, you see Jeff likes to make noises for the pinball machines. So I think we had a tournament early in March, and this was in the tournament, and he would do it.
And then everybody would do it.
And then everybody would start noticing it, and then when it would go off, there'd be a chorus of They love that. You probably didn't envision that happening, but yeah, that's a thing.
I think that might have been an unintended consequence.
Yeah.
Is that an original sound effect?
You're like, one day somebody's going to appreciate that. Spend hours on it.
Exactly.
Is that from the movie, or is that something you created?
Oh, boy, like I couldn't begin to tell you.
It's so important to us, though, David.
Hard-hitting questions. You didn't see that question coming.
I still have all the assets. I could dig through it. I could get that answer.
Life is too short. Life is way too short to do that.
Yeah, you got that right.
Let us know that we want you to know that we appreciate it. But Transformers, like the audio on Transformers is something that, like, not everybody loves the game, but the audio is really good on it.
Yeah, I had a real good. This is one of those where I got to write all original music, and you get to write themes for all these very comic book type characters. Bumblebee, and the bad guys are very bad, and the good guys are very good, and stuff. So that it was more delicious to write the bad guy theme, because when you press start, you got to choose the purple or the green or blue. So you could be a Decepticon and play the game, or you could be Optimus Prime and play the game. And then you had different background music and a different set of modes and stuff. This was all George's idea. So I had to write 2 sets of those things, and this is the bad guy main play theme. This is what you.
All right, here we go. You got some of those like classic transforming sound effects in there and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. I like that one. Okay, and then Avengers.
Yes.
George was hired and put in charge of development and stuff, and he had a desire to have more sound guys. He wanted to have a choice of different guys. The only problem was that they didn't tell me.
So were you doing like all the sound packages for Stern at that point?
Well, as many as I could. There were a couple I didn't do because prior to 2008 they were doing enough machines. So I didn't touch Shrek, and I didn't touch 24, and I didn't touch Buck Hunter, but I was doing most of them.
I wish you did. Well, yeah, Buck Hunter's a little lacking. Yeah.
Well, so George didn't tell me, and then I'm finishing up. I think I'm finishing up Transformers, right? And I talked to Lonnie, and I said, "Well, let's see. Avengers should be going along pretty well. How's that going?" what's going on? And he said, oh, they didn't tell you? This is like a woman telling you, we've got to talk. So, no, what's the deal? Well, it's a long story, but they decided to hire somebody. That's fine. That's their prerogative. Every one of these jobs is like a unique contract, just a thing. I'm like a wandering gypsy who does sound for pinball machines. But you got to tell your consultant before he's done with the current one that you're not going to use him for the next one, so I can go off and find other work. You don't like, oh, didn't somebody tell you? So, now I got a hole in my schedule that who knows when I'm going to get some other work. And so it irritated me. And then I went off and got other work, and some number of months went by, and then I remember it was around Thanksgiving, and I was wondering, gee, I wonder where Avengers is. They should be out now, and how did that work for them? I'm curious. And I get a phone call from George. It's like, Dave, how are you? Are you available? I said, well, for what? Well, this, the guy we hired, he's really good, but we spent the last 6 months, getting the 20 pieces of music out of him. And we, want to send this game off to Europe for tests and stuff. But we don't have any sound effects. Would you do it? And, it was a bad deal because nobody ever ordered a la carte off the menu. Normally, I do the whole package. And they didn't understand that as much as I love writing music and stuff, I spend more than 60% of my time doing the sound effects. That's you play the sound effects. You like to hear the music, but you play the sound effects. If a game's going to be lively and make sense and help you play and all that stuff across, 14 modes, it's a ton of sound effects. And so he wanted to hire me to do the 60% thing for 30% of the money. And so it was hard. But in any case, what did I even give you? This is an example. So this is the Tesseract, right?
Oh, okay.
That object that makes the power and stuff. And that was like that spinny thing.
Yeah.
Well, this is an example, like in sound effects, how I make multiple versions of the same thing. So, because it spins around and you can't make the same sound, it'll sound bogus. So here are 3 variations of the Tesseract sound.
All right,
there were like 12 of them ultimately.
So it's those little tweaks in the sound that, so you're like, oh, it's the same sound effect every time, right?
Right. Because in reality, if you make an action in air, it makes a sound, and it never makes the same. It'll make the same sound, but never quite the same way. And so that's something we're mimicking, even if for no other reason, just to make it seem real. Then sometimes you vary the sounds because things are building, right? You're building up to qualifying something, so many spinners or something.
All right, next up is AC/DC.
Yeah, the Skill Shot Supra. It's a sound effect, because obviously I didn't write any music for this.
So it was just sound effects. That's all you did on AC/DC?
Well, I did one thing, and I don't know if I even want to talk about it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't talk about it.
All right. So set us up for this sound effect we're about to hear.
It's just one of the bigger ones, I think.
A skill shot, super skill shot?
Yeah, super skill shot.
Cool. Let's check it out. So that's kind of building the way you were talking about, right? So it starts off lower and kind of works its way up.
Oh, no, I have 3 of them? Yeah, I have 3 of them. So that's an example of, the first time you do it, you get this. The next time you get this. The next time you get this. So that's an example of, progressive.
You got to build that hype. All right, this is a game I wanted to talk to you about. It was X-Men.
Yes.
Because it's got notorious callouts, right?
Oh. It does. Yes, it does. And one of the things that I learned early on as a sound guy is, fundamentally, I'm a musician, but I've learned to be a sound effects designer. And that's really the thing I think I do on pinball, but I also write music. And the call-outs, I typically don't control them. Sometimes I direct the sessions, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just get a big wave file, and so it's purely a mechanical action to break them up into pieces, give them labels, stick them in the build so that the programmers can call them. And I don't have aesthetically much to do with it at all, right? But early on, when I first went out on Pinside or talked to people, and I've just completed a pinball project, I'm really proud of it, and all people ever talk about are the callouts. It would never even occur to them to say something about the music. I mean, I don't expect them to say anything about the sound effects, because if I do that right, it's like you didn't even notice that I did it. You just came away, excited.
Right.
So that's cool. But I learned that if anybody's going to say anything about sound in a pinball, they're going to talk about the callouts, and probably not much else, except for Nick.
That's true.
I buy pinball games based on the music. To my detriment sometimes.
And I live for you guys, right? I live for Nick. But so, out of enlightened self-defense, I know that my work is going to be somehow colored by the call-out package. But sometimes, I have no control. And at this point in Stern, the way development was being run, I had no control. And they licensed the comic book, not the movies. And comic books are totally silent. So I got to write all music for all the heroes and villains, which was really fun, and I enjoyed it. And and the sound effects that go with all that, I really enjoyed the sound package. And then Stern, I'm going to pass the buck. Stern took care of this call-out package, and they were from the licensor. Well, here's my theory. You want to know how it gets this way?
Yes.
So Marvel has these assets, and they're exploited in toys and things and talking greeting cards and stuff. And so they have a guy who's their go-to guy for their character stuff for those small projects, those small things, right? And they like him. And so he was who Stern had to use. And some of them are okay. The worst ones, and I'll just say this, I don't care, I probably am not going to ever work for Stern again. So it doesn't matter. So let's be honest here. I was there at this session. Now, they threw this young programmer into the deep end and gave him X-Men to do because, he likes comic books so much. He knows so much about comic books. And they also let him, when they, because they had a guy for all the guy voices, but they needed to record Storm, right?
Right.
So our junior programmer at Stern, who owns X-Files, knew somebody and cast her and went to a recording session. And I was supposed to be there to, supervise. But the way they had set it up was that I could only hear the session and I couldn't talk to the talent. So everything I said had to go through the junior programmer. And I heard what they were doing. And it was just so mind-blowingly wrong from casting on. But then the performance that he was soliciting from her was wrong. And so I tried to say that. But I couldn't talk to her, so I said it to him. Then I heard what he said to her, which was not at all what I just said to him.
The bagging a telephone.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's like, then they'd read another page, and it was like, oh my God. And it was like, David, how is that? Fine. just make this session end. And I can't hear that. I just, and that's just how that came down. And it's really a management problem. You really don't take a guy who's a junior programmer who's, about the programming and make him in charge of call-outs. I mean, it's a completely different set of expertise, including casting. When I do these projects, particularly comic book projects, I was a DC guy, and I didn't know the Marvel universe when I started, but we did so many. And so, my job is I come back from a store with all those bound volumes of all the origin stories and all this stuff. I must have read 150 comic books as research for X-Men. It's just what I do because I'm trying to be faithful. And so, okay, I didn't come into this as a wild Marvel person, but I came out of it as a Marvel person, and I even knew who Deadpool was. He is one of the characters, in X-Men.
Yeah. So tell us about this piece of music you wrote for that you're sharing with us here, the Magneto First Mode.
Oh yeah, well yeah, like villains are always more fun to write for than good guys, and this one really just wanted to be electric and magnetic and evil, and it's just I thought I got there.
All right, let's check it out. All right, now we're moving into one of you said earlier, one of your favorite soundtracks ever, Star Trek, right?
Yeah. Steve approached me at one of the June shows, the big pinball show, and told me he was doing it. And I was all very excited about it. And then something, there's all this kerfuffle with Avengers and things. But eventually, the project came to me, and he didn't want any of the Michael Giacchino music, which I agreed with him. And I got to write all this Star Trek music, heroic stuff, enemy battle stuff. It was just a dream. I just really had always wanted to have a shot at that. And so I had a very good time with that. So yeah, the main play music is just, just get out of the academy, and Shatner or Chris Pine is going to take the comm and
all right, let's check it out.
Make it so.
Nailed it.
Yeah, that's music I definitely remember from playing that game.
I own that game, and the music was fantastic in that game. So.
The sound effects, though, that's one of those games, like, when I watch tournament streams, if that game is anywhere in the building, you hear it.
Yeah.
So what's the... I in my head, I'm always like, that's because Steve Ritchie has a hard time hearing, and he insisted on having everything at peak volume, Sabbath volume. You know what I mean?
Well, I own the mix, and, some of those sounds are just so canonical and designed for 60s TV and a cheesy bad speaker in your small television, The thing was, Paramount was righteously benevolent, and they gave us a bunch of sound effects assets from the movies, and then they have a package, right? How many times has Star Trek been developed as some kind of other product? So they had a package of the canonical Star Trek sounds.
Okay.
They just give you, so the communicator and the doors opening and the 9 kinds of lasers and stuff. And so, my only problem is trying to figure out, where they go and what makes sense and stuff. That was a great project. I really liked that project a lot. And that's one of my play fields too, Stern was very good about shipping me a machine to work on kind of halfway through the project. I would probably get Lonnie's cast off when he got the first painted play field. Typically I'd get a Whitewood, I'd get Lonnie's cast off. And when I got that Star Trek play field, and I first flip it, I'm not a great player, but I like playing pinball. And it was just like, oh my God, butter.
That's a game
this is good.
When people ask like what's a good game for a relatively new player getting into it, I always recommend Star Trek because the rules are pretty straightforward and the shots are fun and safe and relatively easy to make, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's move into Mustang.
Mustang. This piece, as a keyboard player, playing in front of people, particularly in rock bands, you're always the forgotten man back there because you're kind of behind a coffin, just the little top part of you sticking up, and nobody can even see your hands. You're just a little bouncing head, Meanwhile, there are people out in front who are, making it. strumming these phallic things and singing and stuff. So I've always had guitar envy. That's the bottom line. I always would like to have the expressivity of guitar. And now my tools give me that. Like if I want to play anything a guitar player can play, I can play. I can make it happen using my tools. So I wrote this country thing for shit-kicking country thing for Upgrade Multiball. And it's clearly a multi-ball tune when you hear it. And it's pretty kick-ass country, modern country guitar stuff. So I like this piece. And, you know, not that many people play Mustang, and those people who do almost never get to Upgrade Multiball. So I just wanted to share it with you.
All right. Here it is for everybody who's never heard it.
Oh, yeah. I remember this song. Yeah.
The kids are all.
I get that. I mean,
All right, there you go. Mustang. So that must have been like a pretty like clean slate for you, like sound effects wise. Like what do you So here's when this game first came out, it had all the horse noises in it.
Right.
And there's a bunch of pushback.
There were horse noises in the
game? Yeah, when you hit the
remember.
spinners or something, right?
Yeah.
What's the story behind the horse noises?
There was somebody thought it was a good idea, and no. At some point, you can't tell somebody, particularly the client. If the client really wants it, you give it to them.
Yeah.
And let them figure out, oh, I didn't really want that.
Sometimes you got to throw it in there and then be like,
yeah. Right. So it was this one where the way development was being managed at Stern and me being an external developer and stuff was just becoming untenable. I mean, I'd been doing this now with them since 2006, and Mustang is 2014. So for 8 years, I've been, varying degrees of frustration and stuff. At Mustang, it went over the top, and the story that I tell, the straw that broke the camel's back was I had made a bunch of sounds. I had that big bank of drops right in the middle of the play field, better or worse. And you need good sounds there. And the initial sounds weren't good at all. So I made some good sounds. And for whatever reason, nobody really had responsibility for main play, for the play field, right? They divided it up. So everybody owned these modes, and everybody was off working on some kind of, multi-ball, wizard, hurry up thing. But nobody really had responsibility for the modes. And I kept, after the third email, right, please, will you just install the right sounds and stuff? And I just wasn't getting any action. So I kind of moved off into a passive-aggressive stance, which I'm not proud of. But it just went out. It went out to Europe, that like 1.0 release. And then the American release for the first machines, went out 1.1. And it was still this crap. And finally, I just said, well, that's not me. I don't ever want this to happen. And so I called Lonnie, who's still my friend, and I said, Lonnie, could you own this? Or can you get somebody to do this? This is just crazy. You've already sent this code out. People who bought these games, and this stuff is nonsense. And you've had this stuff for months, and I just can't get any action at all. So that was it. I didn't want to be maneuvered into that position, and I said I'd rather not do any pinball audio than to do it under these conditions. It just irritated me. So I just decided not to take any more projects from Stern. That was it. I thought I'd do video games or something else.
So you went on, you did video games for a couple of years, and then you ended up with Jersey Jack somehow, right?
Well, no. What happened was, right about that same exact time, Pat Lawler made the announcement that he was going to do a game for Jersey Jack. And I've known Pat since forever, right? He was partially responsible for my, resuming in 2006. So I just sent him a little simple email saying, Pat, congratulations for getting back in the game. It's been about 5 years. The last thing he did was, CSI, bad taste in his mouth. But in a Jersey Jack context, I'm sure he could prosper. I didn't know it. You know, I had sent a thing to Jack suggesting that I should do the sounds for The Hobbit, but I didn't get any action. So, okay. I got an email like back within 20 minutes from Pat saying, "Great, Dave, would you do sounds for my game?" And I said, "Yeah, right. You know, sure." I wouldn't say no to Pat, given what's happened. And but I can't hire you. You know, Jersey Jack's going to have to contract you, and you'll have to talk to Ted. So I don't know Ted. So I called Ted up and talked to Ted, and he seemed like a reasonable human being. And I thought, okay, this will be great, because frankly, I'd been cranking out pins and been very busy for quite some time, and I really wanted the summer off. And I figured, well, if Pat's just starting now, he won't need me till February or March, or because this was in June. And then Ted ended up saying, "And when can you start?" What do you mean, when can I start? Oh, we need help with The Hobbit. Little did I know. Yeah, so, I mean, Jack had hired these guys who were customers of his, who had a company called Two Steps from Hell, and they write trailer music. They're Hollywood guys, and they write the music for movie trailers. Coming this summer to a theater near you. You know, that trailer music stuff. Yeah. And it's perfect for The Hobbit. But when I found out that he did that, I said, well, there's no chance in hell these guys are going to, you know, they're expensive, and they're not going to spend the time to do everything The Hobbit needs. There's just no chance. And yeah, by the time I got there, they had done a handful of things for the game, you know, that weren't music, but they desperately needed help. Plus, they had these 3 movies. Somebody had to dive in there up to their waist and extract voice clips. And these Hollywood guys weren't going to do that. And Ted was doing some of it, but, you know, he needed to be programming, you know. So, yeah, they really needed a sound guy. And then it turns out that there really hadn't been a sound guy on the Jersey Jack platform. Chris Granner was there for about 3 or 4 months, but then he quit. He was gone. He didn't finish Wizard of Oz. And so there was nobody. They hired somebody just to, you know, write some more music and stuff. But there never had been a guy championing as someone who was pushing forward the sound issues that needed to be put forward on the platform. So that was me. And then, so from The Hobbit forward, there's all kinds of stuff in the sound system that wasn't there for Wizard of Oz.
So to me, Hobbit is like the most cinematic game pinball machine I've ever played. It's amazing. It really, you feel like you're in the movie when you're playing it, and a huge part of that is the sound. Like when you're in the out of mode music, and it's the like walking through the Shire music, and then you build up to like into the fire, and it's throwing fireballs and going crazy. I love it. I'm in love with that game. So
yeah, the Hobbit in its current state, you know, shouldn't have ever happened.
Why is that?
Well, it's the kind of project that takes companies down. I mean, it desperately needed some management, and it really didn't have management, and it just got huge, just ridiculously huge. Remember that SAM games were bound by 32 meg. You know, The Hobbit is bound by 32 gigabytes.
Yeah,
got to fill that up.
Yeah.
You can't fill that up. I mean, I think the Hobbit image is like 3.5 gig or something. You know, it's infinite space. Space is out of the equation now. Space is the place. It's impossible. So, you know, when is it done? A lot of people are still asking that.
I think you guys got there. It's amazing now. I love that game.
Yeah. Keith had had a thing in mind, but I don't think he was, realistic about what it would take. And so, and see, he's an employee. Ted's an employee. These guys get a paycheck every 2 weeks. I get paid based on completion. So when The Hobbit is 25% done, I get some money. When it's 50%, I get some money. You know, my tax return for 15, my wife made more money on Social Security, right? It's just, It was dismal because when is it ever going to be 75% done? I don't know, but doesn't seem like it's soon. So that leads me to the next project. But yeah, so I did write some music for The Hobbit. We licensed the old Friends theme, which is really like the best theme, almost the best theme from that genre, and made many different kinds of versions of it. And I took the opportunity to, as you qualify things and stuff. And this is, you're multi-ball enabled. So this is the old Friends theme for multi-ball enabled. But it's kind of butch. It's much more aggressive than da 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 da. This is pinball version of it.
All right, let's check it out. I'm gonna go play Hobbit. it's so good.
All right,
a couple more games, but we're getting into some really interesting stuff here now with Alien, right?
Right. So it's Hobbit's taking forever, and I'm going broke. So at the June show when Jack is out here, I sit down with him and I say, Jack, I got to take work from. Given the rate that you're going, I have time, and I got to take work from other companies. I don't know who that'll be, but I got to find some other work. He wasn't happy, but it's fine. Do what you got to do. So that at that expo, I was aware of this English company that had the Alien license, and I knew they'd hired a sound guy, but I met Oric, and Oric told me the real deal is that the project was moving really slowly, and that the sound guy that they had done nothing, even though he's like a British film sound guy and had worked on like Aliens 3 or something, but he hadn't gotten anything done, and he had no experience doing pinball. So Oric said, I'd love to have you on the project. So then I talked to Highway, and we came to an agreement. So that January, I started working on the project in earnest, and learned very quickly that the only way you get anything done was to keep it in the U.S. That the two programmers were here, the video artist was here, the playfield artist was here, and me. As long as we could keep all our tasks, the important stuff here, and didn't have to deal with between 6 and 8 hours time shift, that we could make it happen. Plus, Andrew had hired a bunch of people from Eastern Europe. They're really nice people. They're very talented, and their English is a whole lot better than my Romanian. But between the time shift and the language differences, it was really hard to collaborate with them. So little by little over the first 90 days, everything ended up being done here that was soft. And then we were, waiting for Andrew to actually build a whitewood that had ramps on it. He had a whitewood, but didn't have ramps, and we would go, where are the ramps? Put the ramps on it. Let's test flip this and da-da-da-da. Well, we could spend an hour, and it was very frustrating. However, let me say that the best thing that Andrew ever did was to put together what I call Team Alien US.
Okay.
Joe and Brian and Oric and Kelly. These guys were great. And this is where I met Slack for the first time, which we used to hold the project together. And we were only over 3 time zones, and that was a lot easier.
Yeah. And
Brian is brilliant, and his system was really solid, and his emulator is kind of text driven but totally functional. And Joe has forgot more about rules, than I'll ever know. I mean, Joe is really a brilliant rules guy, and he's a good programmer too. So the team was great. I had the best time, probably in all the pinball I've ever worked on. I had the best time working on so far. I mean, I'll come to Nirvana once again, I'm sure, but had a great time working with these guys. We were all very we respected each other and each other's input. And this is that dream, like an engineer's dream, right? No management whatsoever, just rational people doing the job.
Yeah.
You know, and how often does that happen? So it was great. But we were doing it all in a simulated space. Nobody had machines. We didn't flip the game until the expo. We've been working on it since January. It's 10 months into this. We flip our first Alien. And I'd never met these guys, right? I've met Oric, but I had never met the team. So we meet each other, press flesh, and then flip one of the severely broken prototypes that Andrew brought over. And up to that point, you know, the software package and the rules and displays and everything can be as wonderful as you want it to be, but you don't know till you flip it. And we knew, you know, Dennis had started it, and Dave Saunders had done a ton of stuff to it. And it was like 2 a.m. when they finally got one working, and I played it for the first time, and I was just like, oh, thank God. At least the one they had there, I did like a 5-way and a 6-way combo, you know, and I was just like making all the shots, and I thought, oh, I was so relieved, because it could have been a hideous turd. I know you think it is a hideous turd, Nick. I saw that. That was painful. Keep in mind, you were playing one of Andrew's early machines. Not good.
Oh.
Not good.
Well, I had one of those moments when we got one of the first ones that shipped. All right, it was on location, and I played it, and the presentation, you know, the visuals, the incorporation of the LCD, the sounds, like, I had one of those moments where, like, oh my God, I might want this game. I got suckered in again, and then I played it and it started falling apart, and it was playing clunky, and then like came back to reality really quickly. But I saw sort of the talent behind that portion of the game. Saw what it certainly could be.
Well, there are two things about it. One is that Dave Saunders created a very eccentric playfield. It's not a fan layout. It's not, you know, it's weird. And until you learn its weirdness, it feels like a clunk fest, quite frankly. It does. But once you figure out where the shots are, there are like 4 different shots from the upper left flipper. There's about 3 or 4 shots from the upper right flipper. Now, you normally don't get that many shots. I mean, even on Pirates, that one upper left flipper, that's primarily the looper. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can, you know, hit a goal target after you've done this enough. You know, really skilled player can, you know, optimize that. But it's primarily for making that terrific loop shot, right? The Dave Saunders playfield, you can do a lot. You can even pass from the upper left flipper to the upper right flipper and then do a thing. I mean, there's a lot there. And so I like it a lot. I actually have one. It was part of my compensation, and good for the guys that took it over from Andrew. They actually delivered machines, working machines, to all the developers. And you'll get that out of my hands, out of my, you know, rip it out of my dead fingers, because I actually I play it. It's the only machine I own, and I come out and I know how to play it, and I still enjoy playing it. So, in any case, the music that I gave you is something that even if you own one, you hardly ever hear it, because it's really hard to qualify this wizard mode, save Newt.
Okay.
Also, this is an example of how the music sets up and lets you know your progression. So there's a phase 1 part of this mini wizard, kind of like the Hobbit. You do that, and then once you accomplish that, you go to a second part of the story where you're chasing down the tunnel, going after Newt. That's phase 2. And then there's yet another phase 3. So this wizard mode really has a lot of stuff to do. And the music helps tell you, you know, your progress, where you are, which phase you're in.
Okay, here we go.
So
phase 1.
You can just play them back to back.
Will do. Will do. So that's phase 1. Let's hear phase 2. And phase 3. And that's like the buildup like that is so important to a player because you're so focused on the playfield, right? It's like you don't, especially if it's a multi-ball, you don't always realize where you are in the game. So having those audio cues is really important to let you know where you are in the game, right?
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say about Alien, you know, it's there's a lot of, it feels tragic in some ways, but I feel very bad for the people who got stiffed, and there are a bunch of them. You know, who gave money and don't have a machine to show for it, or you're part of a machine. I feel very bad about that. There are, you know, more than 100 and less than 200 real machines out there in the world that actually were manufactured reasonably well, and they work. And the other great thing in the demise of Highway is that the community has really come together, creating I/O boards, replacement LEDs, replacement rubber things on the slingshots, that if you get one, you'll be able to keep it working because the community is kind of self-supporting in this regard because people like it so much. And there's a guy in Australia who's done a fantastic job making like the LED boards, and now he's just made the sensor boards because there are no rollover switches in Alien. Yeah. Everything is an inductive switch, and he's just made replacement inductive things just in case.
Genius.
So it's really being supported well, considering that there's virtually no company behind it. I mean, Pinball Brothers is there, and I don't know. I mean, they have a dream. I think they would like to go back in production on it because they understand there's a demand.
Yeah.
And the software, it was always way done, right? It was way more complete than any company that I had worked for. In fact, there's a couple things in the ultimate wizard mode that nobody ever gets to that could be enhanced. But other than that, everything is mature and happening and no bugs and very fleshed out. So it's nifty. So, yeah.
Maybe someday. Well, it's a great theme, right? A lot of people, if they ever get it back into production, people will definitely buy it.
Yeah.
All right, let's bring it on home with your two most recent games, Dialed In and Pirates, right? So let's talk about Dialed In first.
Well, Dialed In being an original theme, and I was there at Expo for that reveal. It's just the worst reveal ever. 5 games behind black, you know, they lift the cloths, and then you can hear a pin drop, and the people going, "Oh my God, there is a cell fold on the playfield. Oh my God." And that was rough and rocky for a little while in terms of impression. But at that same show, they had 5 machines that played pretty well, and they rolled them out onto the floor. And by the end of that day, people were going, "Yeah, I know it's got a cell phone, but did you play it?" Right? And so I thought it was very encouraging, that a company could make an original theme game, a major company, you know, not just Spooky, and that it would be accepted on the basis of, gee, it's a pinball game. It really plays great. Because the Dialed In theme, I think that's Pat's baby, and he picked a really hard target.
Yeah.
Can I see the show of hands for everybody who understands what quantum computing could mean to a computing device? That's what I thought. So it's a hard science fiction metaphor to sell, really. And and I don't think the metaphor didn't sell this. Not just because it was strange, but it just wasn't. I'm not nuts about everything about it, but I love Pat did his job number one. I mean, the game flips great. I have a whitewood here with nothing on it, no sculpture, no paint, I've had to use one of those marking machines and put labels on what the inserts are. It's one of those.
Nice.
But it's still fun to play, and it flips great.
I mean, let me ask you this. This is even talked about. Is the idea that the cell phone is causing the disasters, right? I mean, is it sort of this kind of tongue-in-cheek thing that cell phones are causing problems, anything like that, or does it not go that deep?
That's where the story ends, Nick, and we all like to answer those
That's why I look at it.
See, my problem was always, and I had this problem early on, and I explained it. You know, I was in Chicago at the time, and I said, you know, okay, fine. So I've got my phone. I'm really happy. I got a good deal from Crazy Ed, and I got my phone, and then I get struck by lightning, and it gets charged up, and the first thing it does is I get a crazy call on it from some person I do not know, and then it levels like 4 city blocks. Okay, now, why do I not throw that phone as far as I can? Am I evil? I mean, obviously you get more points for destroying this town. Now, is this town Sodom and Gomorrah and deserves to be destroyed? I mean, it's just the story up to that point is great, and then it just stops. It just stops, and I don't know.
Yeah, when I first played it, I assumed you were trying to stop the disasters, but I'm like, no, you're actually like making the city blow up.
You're progressing the disasters. Well, listen,
it's best not to ask why.
You've got to ham an organ into a pinball machine. And that's fantastic. I love that song and Dialed In. It gets stuck in my head. When we had that like prototype early on, and we were able to stream it, I played a lot of it. And I was like, man, this is great. I'm just like humming, singing the song. Perfect. Nailed it.
Yeah, well, that's that deal. In a license, which I didn't think had a lot of places to get attached to. You know, I went full Monty jingle. Right, and I actually wrote this lyric, right? I've got a cell phone. It's better than yours. I've got a cell phone. I don't know how to use it. So, and but that was like my third swing at main play music. Because Pat had this idea for main play music, and he was very specific. It was some Portland band. It's kind of like you take a swing band like a jive band from the 40s and mix it with Chicago. You know, so you have the three horn section and really fast tempos. And he had a cut in mind, and that's what he wanted. He was very specific. So I did that. I did an instrumental version of something like that. I channeled it. And I wrote it, so I liked it well enough. But, I'm like, what does this have to do with Quantum City or cell phones or anything? I mean, all it does is it's energetic, right? And so it's suitable for pinball in the regard that it's energetic. But otherwise, and I knew, and this took me, it was big band kind of horns and stuff. Very hard to do if you're a keyboard player. So, I mean, I spent 4 days making this, and I knew it was never going to see production. I just knew it. But it lived in that pinball machine, I think, for 5 months. Until the boys in Bensonville, the 4 programmers, said enough. And they convinced Pat. They said, Pat, we hate this. We hate this with a red-hot passion.
I want to hear it now. Is there any chance that we'll ever be able to hear that?
Yes, actually. The easiest way is to go to YouTube and look up. I did a talk at the Vancouver show.
Okay.
And I document this whole thing, and you can hear all the versions, including.
All right, fantastic.
I even show a picture of the band. So just go out. It's about
we'll check it out.
20 minutes into that talk. I document this in all its gory detail. So then I get the phone call from Ted. It's like, Dave, we have to talk. I knew what this was. Of course we want to talk. Nah. So I knew we hate this song, and we've convinced Pat, so Pat will let it go. So then I made something, and it didn't quite work, but it had some of the things about it that ended up being the Dialed In tune.
Nice.
So
is that what we have here?
That's what you have here is the dialed in tune.
All right, let's check it out.
Isn't that working?
You have to sing along with
That's good. Nailed it.
it. Thank you.
It's so, you know what? It's funny. Like I early on, I liked the music in your pinball machines so much that I looked up who did the music in the pinball machine. And I think today, whether you're doing the music or somebody else, music is generally good in pinball machines. I really respect what's being put out as a product. But you're the only person that I know by name. I mean, I know Chris Granite because I've heard it a million times, but I think you do great work, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate that.
All right.
That, you know, that's my instrument, right? I mean, I used to drag around the mighty Hammond B3. It's a lot like dragging around a pinball machine and putting it on stage every night. It's about as heavy and it's about as cumbersome. And so that's mother's milk to me, and I rarely resort to it. But when I get desperate and I'm really looking for something, I can just play, right? When I'm being an orchestra, that's a very abstract concept of being a keyboard player. I got to think about crazy string articulations and things which, have no feel to them. They're just abstract concepts. But B3, I can just play. I just put my hands down there and play it. So I had a good time with that.
All right. So this is a game that had much better reveal, especially the streaming side of it.
A little biased, but the streamers who did this crushed it.
They nailed it.
First class. First class. Oh, speaking of streaming, though, I did want to say that keep in mind that the developers for Alien were hardly ever getting to touch the machine. So the Twitch streams, and particularly yours, were just totally invaluable because that was our only experience of the physical game.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy.
What a bizarre environment to try to work in.
Yeah, it's a testament. I mean, it's pretty impressive what you guys were able to pull off given those conditions.
Well, it was what? I started in January, and then a January goes by, January, February, March, April, May, June. So 18 months later, I finally got one to work on. Wow. I had it here at my studio.
I'm really happy that you've done work for Jersey Jack because they throw the kitchen sink into their games, which means that they have, what is it, a 4.1 speaker system in there? I mean, they've got the regular, the mids, they got the tweeters, and then they got like that.
The bass,
the bass.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the games, your work sounds really good. I mean, it sounds at its best compared to, no offense, but it's not going to sound that great in a Stern like it does in a Jersey Jack machine.
Well, the new Sterns, to be fair, I think are better. The Spike Sterns.
Definitely.
The old ones suffered from a lot of things. Not great drivers. When I was called in to help make AC/DC sound better, I had always taken the Stern system for granted. I mean, it's a given. It's what I have to work with, so I optimized it. But when AC/DC wasn't sounding good, I actually looked at it and realized that cheesy 6-inch speaker was mounted with a metal grill with not big holes over slotted particle board. So there wasn't a hole there for it. There were just some half-inch slots. So half of the surface of the speaker was being occluded by 3/4-inch particle board.
Oh, wow.
I mean, how the hell do you expect the sound to get out of that hole? That's crazy. So that was one of the things from AC/DC forward. If you look at the underside of Stern pinball games, they all have a hole now because I just jumped up and down and turned purple and said, put a goddamn hole there and find a grill with bigger holes, and then the speaker that you paid money for will have a chance to get out.
Yeah, Interesting.
It's another 5 cents they saved in wood on every machine, too.
There you go.
All right, let's talk pirates.
Let's talk pirates.
Okay, so originally I turned pirates down.
Why is that?
I'd done one, and I'd done a Disney Pirates, and it was just a veil of tears. It was so hard, and expectations were going to be so much higher, right? because it's now going to be based on 5 films, not 2. It's going to be a Jersey Jack game, and the difference between the old Pirates and the new one is the old one had a DMD display, then we have a television. So the expectations to exploit Pirates the way it should be were going to be crazy high, and it's a Disney license, and I knew from my prior experience that it was just going to be crazy hard. So I just said, no, I'm going to pass on this. And then that was like maybe at the end of January. And 2 weeks into February, the Seattle area had the most rain ever recorded over a 30-day period. And then the hillslide, I live on a slope, the hill on my slope moved away from my house, taking all the supports with it. So we had a landslide.
Oof. Jeez.
I won't get into the gory, expensive details of that. And it was a bit scary and incredibly expensive. But the next, within a couple days, I called Jersey Jack back up and said, I'm a pirate.
I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm really happy you did the sound for that game.
But then let me say that I was wrong with John, I was wrong about this because I underestimated really what Keith, and I didn't know what Eric could do. You know, he's a new guy. I knew him because he had designed light boards and stuff, but it was his first one. And between the two of them, the way they worked the stuff that they did get from Disney, I think is a great pinball game. You know, I have no problem. I don't think anybody else should have a problem. You know, you wouldn't even know. If I didn't tell you, you wouldn't even miss the assets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? They did spend the money to hire, you know, the actor who's in all 5 films. And I think Gibbs works great. He's such a talented actor. We had 2 sessions with him.
Yep.
And he did it was good casting. He's the guy who should be telling you this shit because he's always telling everybody what to do, even Jack. And so he's the right person. He has the right voice. He's an incredibly talented actor. Our first session was done on his day off from being King Lear in London.
Wow.
On Broadway, whatever their equivalent is. So, I mean, he was so good. And so we have all custom line. And we did have him record like 250 lines that he said in the movies, but I don't think we used them much because like all lines derive from the movie. You know, it's hard to find a good way to use them. But we had a nice second session and we recorded a whole bunch of stuff, and the call-outs are perfect and they're functional. I just can't say enough. I think the call-out package, I mean, I would have loved to have a second voice in there and everything could always be better, but I think Gibbs nails it. And I'm very happy with the call-out package. And then Keith's design, you know, I think it's a really clever thing. And it's early days. Here's an overall thing from the sound guy, that it's early days in figuring out what to do with these high-res screens. We've had them not that long, relatively speaking, right? Jersey, you know, Wizard of Oz, that's the first time. And now Stern's, you know, putting some on, and Alien, and now they're pretty much everywhere. But what's fun about that? You know, how do you use this resolution? How do you use these colors? How do you know, where do you put it? What do you do with it? How many of them are there? You know, it's early days, and we're still inventing and finding the good use for it. But I think on Pirates, the way that JP used the screen, I think he discovered something, because Pirates supports that, you know, multiple stuff, all this stacking, 6 multi-balls going simultaneously plus a mode, you know, and it doesn't devolve into insanity. You can still tell what the hell's going on, and you can be rewarded for each of the multi-balls, and it all kind of makes sense. And you couldn't have done any of that with the DMD display. You could have done the concurrent stacking, but it wouldn't have made any sense.
Yep.
So I think JP in this game, this will be like, you know, the first time that somebody used the screen for something more than pretty. That it really, in terms of gameplay, is tremendously functional, because Pirates is great when you're stacking.
Yeah, when you get those multi-balls going with the different strips going, and you just, I'm like, I want to fill them all up.
Yeah, and the design, both in color and in location, they're consistent, and it all just makes sense. And that was all on purpose. JP has just grown incredibly as a designer for pinball. I mean, I can't say enough nice things about JP. He's a fantastically talented guy, and I almost never talk to him or even write to him, because the stuff he submits I just use. I mean, it's just fine. I never have to go back and say, well, could you make that shorter? Could you put this here? Could you put that there? It's all just great.
His display work is outstanding.
How long does it take? How long does it take you from start to finish to do a game how long did it take you to do Pirates?
Let's see. Pirates, Pirates wasn't so bad. It's more than a year. It's like 16 months or something.
Wow.
Because still, it's a big game.
Yep.
I mean, the 127 variations on those modes. Right up, I said, when I first got the spec, I just like Keith. Like I'm not writing 127 mode tunes. That's out. Not happening. Then I was, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And until I really understood how the modes were structured and stuff, I finally said, okay, there's 22 characters. Are there 22, 23 characters? Every character will have their own tune. Okay, I can do that.
Awesome.
And then I got the programmers to put in an algorithm so that when you start a mode, if you have 5 characters in the mode, the music that plays will be based on the character whose turn you haven't heard.
Nice.
It's least recently used.
Yeah.
And so they keep track of the last time these tunes were used. They store that. Why not? So every time they use a mode tune, they timestamp it and say, okay, this is when we use this. So then they have the 5 timestamps, and they sort by the timestamps and go, oh, you haven't heard this one in 2 days. Okay, let's play that one.
That's great.
So that keeps it, but it's still fitting because, it's one of the characters in the mode.
Right.
And those characters were not just randomly picked. I mean, these guys went through every chapter.
God.
Basically, there's 127 things. If you go through the 5 movies and look at the table of contents on the DVD, you basically get 127.
Wow.
So then you look at those scenes and you see who's involved in the scenes and stuff. And so then they extracted 127 video clips. They're in there. They just, have to do the dance that there are no actors in them.
Wow.
Which is an interesting constraint.
It's a crazy project, but we love the end result. So let's bring it home with this clip you got from Pirates. This is multi-ball.
Let's see. Here we go.
Well, it's the multi-ball qualified.
Yep. Here we go. That's the man. I gotta hit the multi-ball.
That's
shot.
multi-ball qualified.
Yeah.
That sounds like the main one.
It is the main one, except more butch.
I gotcha. I like the when the Tortuga's ready. I like that's my personal favorite right now.
All right, David, we got a couple viewer questions for you if you got time.
Got time.
All right, let's do it. So
they asked if they can get these tunes outside the game. So
we talked about that
as he said that earlier in the show. Reach out if you want. David's happy to make these available, but it's not his decision. It's up to Jersey Jack. So reach out to Jersey Jack and ask if they can make that available.
All right. So Q&A time. So the first one comes from Psychosonic on Twitter. He says, have you dabbled in designing pin audio hardware or interfaces that would optimize your workflow? So not the music itself, but actually making the work happen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Since the earliest day, when I was working at Gottlieb, this is 1980. And so MIDI, the way you hook up keyboards to computers and stuff, had not been invented yet. not there. So if you wanted to put music into a computer, you had to somehow write it down and then transcode it into whatever format the thing will play it. So you're taking stuff off a staff and you're like writing it in hex, and very painful. So the way I thought of it is the keyboard is really a musical typewriter. That's all it is, right? I play a C. The computer should know I played a C. So while I was still at Gottlieb, I had them buy a raw keyboard. Had no wires or anything attached to it. And had I stayed at Gottlieb long enough, I still wouldn't have done it, because then they came up with MIDI, and then I could just buy a board and stick it in a PC and then hook it up. So I had my musical typewriter by 1983. After I left Gottlieb, I bought a DX7 from Yamaha and wrote my own sequencer and did whatever it took, because I had no patience for that, writing it down. It's like dotting your art, one pixel at a time. And the way you express yourself is not ideal.
Yeah.
And I've heard Chris Granter talk about what they did at Williams, and they had a lot more patience for dots than I did. I was using sequencers and MIDI and stuff at the same time. He was still like writing it down. And
nice.
So.
All right, next question from Owen Praco on Twitter. He says, "What vocabulary?" This is an interesting question. What vocabulary do you use to describe to others what sounds you are working on or thinking of, like noises or buzzes or clonks or things like that?
Well, here's the deal. Anybody that you work with, unless they're another sound guy, has no vocabulary. They don't really think in those terms, and they have a hard time forming the words. It's just like more bass. I want more bass. They don't mean that, but bass is the only word they know. So I try to stay out of the word space when collaborating. I work by example more. So I with the minimum investment of effort, I'll gather up some things and play it and say, well, you like this? Is it more like this? It's kind of like an eye test. Better or worse? And so working from example, and that also with music. At some point, I'll just go off to a music library and gather up something and play it and say, well, is it something like this, or do you have something else in mind? Because why should it's a specialized thing. It's a specialized vocabulary, and why should anybody know except a musician or a sound effects guy? So sure. I work through example, and that works much better.
So he had a second question, which kind of ties into the next one from Mr. Snark. And so Mr. Snark asks, how conscious are you of the balance between a rich, varied library of sound effects and a repetitive quote every time someone goes down the out lanes, for example? And he asks, will we ever see multiple sound samples for the same event to break up the monotony? And we kind of got into that a little bit earlier, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, if I'm on the project, I will lay my body down on the railroad tracks to try to prevent that latter case. I mean, I don't want that to happen, but I typically don't implement the sounds in the build. I have done some of it because I am a programmer, but about 90% of it I leave to them, and sometimes I don't even realize how they've used things until I get to that spot. But all sound effects are, have multiple versions, or they communicate some kind of progression or something, and so they have lots of variety. But I also, when building call-out packages, it's the matter of the well-traveled area, right? If jackpots, you're going to get a ton of jackpots. How many ways are there to say jackpot? And what could you possibly say besides jackpot and still have, you could say Lion Man, I guess.
You could.
There aren't that many things you can say that culturally resonate. So, jackpot is the single most used word, but I try to find as many, Pirates he has 12 different ways of calling out jackpot. And he was great at coming up with them and stuff.
That's
and then
awesome.
We also found some other, good job kind of things that can be said. If you have speech on an outlane, and I'm trying to think, I don't think I can think of a game with speech on an outlane. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I had speech on an outlane, that's going to be a high traffic area. And I want to guarantee I have a half dozen ways of saying something about that. I would never consult and let anybody do that so that it said the same thing, because that there lies madness.
Oh yeah,
You shot a doe.
Big Buck Hunter.
Yeah,
says it every time.
I know about every time. That's a good. I'm gonna check it out.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
It sticks with you though. It just gets locked in there.
Well, yeah, speech is incredibly memorable. You remember words, right? Sound effects, not so much. I mean,
that's true.
Depends how annoying the sound effect is.
It's very true, though. Yeah, the speech, I can't remember sound effects for a lot of outlanes, but like, sure, speech, very much so.
Yeah. So you have to be very careful. You have to provide some nice variety, hopefully meaningful as well.
All right, the next one comes from TurboGrafx7 on Twitter. He says, not really a question, but I would like him to know that I think he is the best sound engineer in pinball. The games he has worked on really stand out. He's the John Williams of pinball. So there you go. Little unabashed praise from TurboGrafx. He's in chat today, right now, too, so he can wave to you from chat. HSJ3 on Twitter asks, so we know the dialed-in theme has lyrics, that I have a new phone. He says he can't stop humming it. Does any of the other pinball themes you've worked on have lyrics too?
Well, yeah. Typically not a lyric. I'll pick on something like War Machine, War Machine. If I go back, almost every game has at least one of those.
Okay.
And I use that as sort of a compositional constraint, and also to make it a little more accessible.
Nice. All right, we got one question from email, but this is from the Girl Geek, and she's very, very excited. So she's asking you 3 questions. Number 1, since you've programmed/designed audio for a number of platforms, console, computer, arcade, pinball, what's been your favorite system to work on and why?
Oh. Well, there's no one simple answer. There are standouts. There are certain things that were really good, like back in the day, the C64 had the SID chip, and that was a terrific chip with lots of possibilities. And I did about 5 games on that. So the SID chip was great to work on. That was a lot of fun. Ironically, the thing that Andrew Highway assembled for Alien is the best sound system. It has the most substantial bass, and it really sounds great. Jersey Jack would be next, but we redesigned that when Pat came in. Dialed in and Pirates are a different design than the Hobbit or Wizard of Oz. It looks the same from the outside, but we got rid of the small drivers because 2.5-inch drivers do not a 5-inch speaker make. Sorry.
You can't just add them up like that?
Well, if you had enough of them, but 2. Plus, you also need a much more kick-ass amplifier to make 2.5-inch speakers. So there's a 5-inch speaker in Dialed In and in Pirates, but it faces up, and then there's a diverter that has it come out of that slot.
Nice.
So it's not perfect, but it's much better.
Cool. Yeah, you notice the difference when you're playing it. So the next question she had was, when working with music that is just going to be a clip instead of a full song, do you compose a full song or do you write just for the specific time allotted?
I write for, it's in my mind. I need 30 seconds. 30 seconds is a magic number, right? I mean, how long is a pinball game on average?
A couple minutes.
Yeah, 120 seconds total.
Wow.
On average. And there are people who will play for an hour, but your average pin game, certainly in coin-op, you were trying to make money with it as an operator, it would be short. So writing 2-minute tunes doesn't make that much sense because you're going to switch away from it to a mode or something anyhow. So my loops are typically shorter. Now sometimes I'll even use the shortness of a loop as part of, if you're in a hurry up, where I'll have a really short loop where the repetition is kind of like, you got to get this done. I don't want to hear this music anymore. So Yeah, sometimes that gives a sense of urgency to it. So I'll even write shorter than normal loops. But the only things that really get like tune length for me would be like main play, where I think you might be there for a while if you spend some time trying to qualify things before you go off to do something else. Main plays are typically 180 seconds.
Nice.
But I do compose for the time. Right?
Okay.
I got so much to write, and in modern times, I used to write 14 songs. There are 42 songs in Pirates. I didn't have to write them all because Disney gave us a few, but still, I wrote like 28 pieces of music for Pirates. That's a lot of pieces, especially when it's orchestral.
Yeah, it's a lot of songs to write. All right, last question. Do you prefer being given free range for creating music for a game, so something like Dialed In, or do you like the constraints of having it match a theme or style like Pirates?
Oh. Well, I like writing music, so either way, I like doing it. Pirates scared me, right? Because I knew people were going to come with that expectation of hearing the Klaus Badelt music or Hans Zimmer. There's some question as to which guy is actually responsible, but Klaus gets the thing on the movie. So the themes from the first movie are great. There is no music from movies 2 through 5 that are anywhere near as good as what's in the first movie. And that's what people have in their head. They want to hear he's a pirate. Da-da-dum-dum, da-da-dum-dum. They want to hear that.
Yep.
I don't blame them. I do too. And we did move heaven and earth trying to get it. Just not going to get it. So then it's up to me to write something as good as that, as memorable as that. And, even they didn't. They had 4 more movies and they didn't write anything as good as He's a Pirate. And they've got, 100 people sitting there ready to render the tune that the guy wrote. And they've got orchestrators. And they got 120 people producing these things. And there's just me. And I'm trying to be competitive, so it's daunting and scary. And Pirates, once the thing was with Pirates, I had a good time because I had already done the research. I knew what piratey music was because even though I didn't have the same, I wasn't as good as doing orchestra 12 years ago as I am now. I had it in my head. I knew what I needed to do to make piratey music. And so a lot of my work was done. So I really had a good time making piratey music. I have a couple pieces, 3 or 4 of them that I really like a lot, that I'm so glad I wrote them. I hope everybody enjoys them as much as I do. But, So what the answer is...
Pick one.
I think
you got to pick one.
Dialed In. I prefer having a totally open theme where I can do what I think... I'm still writing commercial music. I'm never going to write David Thiel music for any pinball machine unless the theme of the pinball is David Thiel. So, no, I'm still, and then I might not like that because maybe it's a really dopey theme that I'm having a hard time connecting to, or just even, what music could possibly tell this story. Some themes, especially original themes, are kind of like that sometimes, and it's a hard road to find the hook and say, okay, here's the concept that's going to make this work. I've just had one of these with a company that I'm working with, but I found it now. But that was hard, and it's an original thing, but that was really hard. But now that I found it, now it's just more into the mechanism of cranking it out and exploiting it. But sometimes the hardest thing is to find the concept.
All right. Well, I'm going to take my Dialed In. I'm going to retheme it into David Thiel Pinball. And I'm going to recruit you to write me a custom sound package. How about that?
There you go.
All right, David. Well, we can't thank you enough for all your time. And
it's very generous of you. Thank you so much.
An amazing journey through your career. And, it's been a long... I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. So really appreciate you joining the show tonight.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate it because, I do represent sort of an optional media. And I know a lot of folks have never heard a bunch of this stuff. And I like to share because I liked writing it, and I hope people like hearing it. And so, you guys are fans, and you appreciate it, and so it's so nice to, talk to somebody who's actually listened to it and enjoyed it, and it's worked for them. So yeah, this is great.
Awesome.
And,
well, we look forward to seeing you at a future pinball show. I'm going to try to get to Texas, so if you're heading out there, maybe I'll see you there.
Yeah.
All right. Best of luck in your endeavors at Deeproot, and keep on cranking out that awesome pinball music.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, I think we were planning on doing a whole bunch more stuff here, but I think we got to call it there.
We'll call it. We'll call it.
We get part 2 to come next month, where we recap news, and we're going to update our reviews of Batman 66 and Guardians of the Galaxy.
I think that was our best interview. There's some really interesting stories to dive in, and
the Secret Service story was my favorite. It
was fantastic. You really understand. It's pinball's really complicated.
Yeah.
It's really complicated. There's so many moving parts. There's different skill sets involved. It's amazing that these things get made.
I know
when you hear about it, and we sort of know this intuitively, and we see this if you've been in the hobby long enough. But to hear David talk about some of the things, especially from the music aspect, sheds a lot of light on things that we kind of speculate what we don't know. So it was it's a privilege to kind of get some of that behind the scenes stuff, because a lot of times you don't get that.
No.
You can go to seminars and the designers there, and you get that. But if you're not going to shows, how do you know this stuff?
Right.
So,
and a lot of times, even then, it's like a prepackaged, like, here's what I'm going to talk about. And
exactly.
Here we had a little more freedom to kind of go off the rails and get the fun stories. So
yeah,
that was awesome.
Certainly appreciate him being forthcoming about a lot of that stuff. So very cool. Thank you, David.
Especially the X-Men callouts.
Yeah. Well, how do you say differently? It's like. You can't be a sound person. You can be anybody who's not a sound person and be like, okay, that sucks. Come on.
Good times. All right, so we kicked Rudy off of Friday night, so he's going to be tomorrow night. But until then, thanks for listening to Brody Even Talk Pinball. You can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all the things.
All the things. We're on Patreon.
We are.
For the few folks who want to support us that way, go to patreon.com/Buffalo Pinball.
Yep. The Girl Geek submitted her questions via our email address. It was talkpinball@gmail.com. If you have questions for us or comments about the show, want to throw some feedback our way, you can do that there.
Here's some other easy lifts. Check out our YouTube page and hit subscribe.
Yep.
Give us a follow on Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
Subscribe on Twitch.
Subscribe to the podcast.
You can write a review on iTunes, which will help bump us up, and you can spread the word on Pinside. There's a thread talking about podcasts, and we don't come up that much
because we're not every week in your head.
We've got a lot of downloads. It's kind of weird. Maybe they're not all on Pinside people. Well, there's a lot of anger on Pinside. So
people have short attention spans, so it's like between the everybody else is putting out like 4 episodes between our episodes, so we're not top of mind. But the few comments we got.
Brevity is my best friend, so I'll stick to that.
This is the one for the long folks, the folks who like the long podcast. This
is on point.
Yes.
All right.
One more thing you can do is subscribe to us on Twitch. So if you have a Amazon Prime account, it means you get Twitch Prime.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're just throwing your money away. You might as well give it to us.
Yeah, that's true. Kevin speaks the truth.
All right, guys. Until next month, have a happy holiday season and a great new year. We will see you then. Take care, and we will see you next time.